Good morning. Testing the microphones, everyone. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the July 1st, 2025 agenda meeting of the Minnesota Public Utilities Commission. Before we begin, I'd like to especially welcome the folks that used to work at the Department of Commerce that are now Minnesota Public Utility Commission employees. We have a little celebration here today for them. Also this afternoon, we are going to conclude our agenda meeting at the latest by like 1:30 because at 2 o'clock the staff is celebrating the service of Will Soifert, who our executive secretary of 5 years, who is leaving the commission for a different job. And Will is in the back, and I hope that everyone in the audience today congratulates him and gives him a hard time for leaving the state of Minnesota and his shining colleagues that are going to miss him. We have 4 or 5 items on our agenda today, depending on how you look at it. Our first item, Sam Lobby, please introduce it when you're ready.
Good morning, Chair Sieben. Good morning, Chair Sieben and Commissioners. Item number 1 is for docket numbers IP 7135/GS-22-57, the solar facility, and IP 7135/ESS-24-238, which is the storage facility, in the matter of the joint application of Northern Crescent Solar LLC for a solar energy generating system site permit and a battery energy storage system site permit for the up to 150 megawatt Northern Crescent Solar and 50 megawatt storage project in Faribault County, Minnesota. The questions before the Commission are: should the Commission adopt the administrative law judge's findings of fact, conclusions of law, and recommendation? Should the Commission find that the environmental assessment and the record created at the public hearing adequately address the issues identified in the scoping decision? Should the Commission issue a site permit for the up to 150 megawatt Northern Crescent solar energy generating system? And should the Commission issue a site permit for the up to 50 megawatt battery energy storage system? Commissioner Tuma filed additional decision options on Monday, June 30th. Commissioners have received these documents, and printed copies are available on the table at the back of the room. I have no further remarks, but I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lobby. If the parties want to come forward, we'll start with appearances and then turn to Commissioner Tuma for questions. Good morning. Starting on my far right, there's a button on the bottom of the microphone, and if you could please introduce yourself and the party that you're representing.
Hello, my name is Helen Roach. I'm a project development manager with Primergy Solar, and I am the lead developer for the Northern Crescent Solar and Storage project.
I am Evan Heward, Senior Project Development Manager at Primergy Solar, and I'm supporting Helen on the Northern Crescent Solar and Storage project.
Good morning, Chair Sieben, Commissioners. Jeremy Deere with Frederickson and Byron on behalf of Northern Crescent Solar.
Good morning. Logan Hicks, the former Department of Commerce employee, now representing the PUC today.
Welcome aboard. And by the way, good work on this one. Those are actually good reading. So, Madam Chair, I just have a few questions. I don't know where you want to start. First, I guess, is vegetation plan, or we can talk about, the emergency plan. I guess fire safety. So, where do you want to start, Mr. Deere?
Perhaps one other thing that I think that's also in your revised decision options, the PPA. So 6C, the applicant is supportive of that condition, except that we believe that that condition originated in wind, which provide 2 years to come to construction. And so therefore it provides 2 years to provide evidence of the PPA. In solar and battery storage, it's 4 years. So we would just ask that changes from 2 years to provide evidence of a PPA to 4 years. So it more closely aligns with that timeline to actually start construction.
And already in the permit is a 4-year, that's what I was trying to understand, the timing of how this works. You already have a 4-year. If you don't start construction, you got to come back to us. So how would that be different? You're not going to start construction unless you have a PPA lined up. But that's our concern, is we don't want you to start moving dirt on the hopes that you're going to get a PPA or a promise of a PPA and then pull the plug after Great River, Xcel says, sorry, we're not buying you anymore. So
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, that's correct, but we also believe that it's more appropriate to have the full 4-year runway to get that PPA. The way the condition is drafted, if you don't have a PPA within 2 years, you have to come to the commission, explain why, and then the commission can take action on the site permit. And so in the context of a wind site permit, that makes a lot more sense because it also matches that runway for starting construction. In this case, it could be premature to provide we could have a checkup and provide, updates like you require on many projects, right? But I'm not so sure that if the project doesn't get a PPA by year 2, that it's ripe or necessary to come before the commission.
now we might take a break and talk to staff, but I'm kind of open to that idea of 4 years, but have a check-in maybe annually on where the PPA is, filing with the commission, a compliance filing. That to me would make sense, so we know where you're at. From a practical purposes at this stage, the way they've financed this, more than likely they got to have this thing, based on the new law, at least the rumors I'm hearing, they're going to have it up and running before 2028 to make this cash flow. So it's probably all meaningless, the conversation we're having now as far as this permit. But this is likely what's going to end up in the draft site permits going forward. That's why we're behind the scenes. We're kind of trying to figure out where it should be and how it should look going forward. But I do want to touch base with staff before we wrap this up, but we'll set that aside. But I'm thinking you'd be okay if you had a yearly compliance where the PPA is at, and then have the 4 years be the date.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, that's correct.
Next, vegetation. You saw my decision option. Any problems with that?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, we believe the section 5.5 of the site permit, as it's written, actually covers everything appropriately without getting into specifics as to one adjacent landowner. The record, the EA, and the ALJ report talked about, especially for aesthetic impacts, there are 2 potential mitigation options, one being a private agreement between the project company and the landowner, so like a good neighbor agreement or something of that sort, as well as visual screening. Our concern with this language is it doesn't really reflect what's actually going on the ground. After the public hearing in March, the applicant met with Mr. Shavy, the owner of this property. In particular, Mr. Shavy in his letter expressed concern about being able to see the entire project. He is on a little bit of a hill. We may not be able to have a quote-unquote effective full screening of the entire project from his property, or his property to the project, as it were. But they have been, and they met with him again yesterday to talk about both private agreements as well as visual screening. And they've also been meeting with every other landowner that's within or directly adjacent to the project to work on a visual screening plan or private agreements or some combination of both that works for everybody. We think that flexibility and the general language about working with individual landowners to come up with a visual screening plan that works for them and works for the project is the more appropriate approach, rather than getting into the details on one specific landowner.
Well, I don't think my decision option got into the details. It says, I'm watching you with that one because I've seen it, and I agree with him that he is probably, of all the landowners there, the most impacted. I think you'd agree with that. I mean, his view shed is probably the most. Now, he doesn't own a right to that view shed, okay? If he wanted to have that view shed, he should have bought the farm, okay? But I think being good neighbors, and you guys, I think, had a good neighbor's attitude, we're going to work on it, and I'm going to be watching it. So whether we put it in or not, I'll see what my friends say. But I can tell you, I'm going to go back and make sure he's taken care of. He'll have the complaint process. That's what I'm asking for. Let him know he can complain to us. I'm not saying anything particular how you do it. Okay, I don't care if you build a fence or you grow ivy. I don't know what it'll be. That's between you and the landowner. I just want to make sure he's taken care of because we want to treat landowners out there as good neighbors, and we don't want it, causing people sending us letters about the acts of God, telling us that we can't trespass on, their neighbor's property. Okay, we're trying to keep things calm, and so that's why I put it there. Whether we put it in the permit or not doesn't matter to me. I just want you to know I see it. I agree with you that it is the most impacted and that we should take good care of him as much as we can. Some landowners you can never make happy. I get that. We've seen that before. But I agree. He's on a hill. It does look bad when you drive by his property. So,
Chair Seaman, Commissioner Tuma, just to follow up, we definitely understand your point. We don't think it belongs in the site permit. We do note that it is addressed in reply comments that the applicant submitted, a commitment to work with him specifically, as well as in the ALJ report. So it is fully developed in the record.
and I agree with you.
Commissioner Tuma, not to
Yep.
slow your roll here,
You can
but,
always slow my roll, Madam Chair.
but
your
we're
job.
just having trouble finding the right amendment.
Oh,
So can you,
Should
great,
be-
thank you. So,
something like that. So the one we just talked about is 6A.
this is the visual screening plan for this one property.
That's right.
And Mr. Deere said that he thinks the existing section 5.5 kind of covers it, and they'll keep working with the applicant as best they can. But,
Is my understanding, and
but you think adding in this specific address would belt and suspenders it?
it would, but I also just put it out there to make a highlight today. So if we just have 5.5 as it exists, it's not a big deal to me. So I just want to make sure we were looking at that particular property. I think our new employee, you've been out there, I think you would agree that Mr. Scavey was probably the most impacted visually of the landowners out there, right?
To be crystal clear, I'm not familiar with that exact. I've not been on that person's exact land. I've only driven by it, so I could not attest to the view shed of that property.
That's fine. And so, and the last one I have is the emergency pre-construction visit with emergency folks. I read in the document, of course, it probably unnecessarily got me a little anxious that we're going to do a virtual meeting with them, and that kind
A
of
little louder, Commissioner Tuma.
that the fact that you had in the record that you're going to do a virtual first meeting with emergency services is what set me off, and so that's why you see the decision option in front of you. Mostly I want to know that you are actually in the community. I had to read to find out who owns you and where you own. I learned about Jersey funds, and they're not New Jersey funds. They're Jersey funds from someplace across the ocean owns us. But you guys did a great job. The people who bought you and owned you think that you're doing a good job. You've done major projects in other states, and so you're not new to the game. But in Minnesota, we kind of like you to be meeting with the local folks, and emergency services for BESS is a big issue. We just had a whole discussion about that with folks down in Freeborn County, and so we've been thinking about how do you respond to a BESS fire, and BESS fires are concerns. So people are going to go online and they're going to read all about it, and so it really is important, I think, for this commission that there is a hands-on approach with our emergency services folks, that you don't really have an in-depth discussion about what emergency services looks like in that community till you're down there with them and you're seeing the facilities they have, the equipment they have. That's, to us, is important that you have those relationships. So I did get a little set off by saying our first meeting is going to be virtual. So that's the genesis of what I created here, is to say, meet with these folks, provide them the equipment they need. I think that's the attitude I heard from you folks. So, Mr. Deere, what do you think about B?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, we think that condition 812 in the site permit adequately covers the emergency response plan and its development. It talks about preparing the plan in consultation with the emergency responders having jurisdiction over the project. And it actually moves that forward so that it needs to be done prior to construction. It needs to be developed in consultation with them. A lot of the things I think you're trying to get at here. And a lot of the commitments, it appears as though a lot of the commitments that you've pulled from here were directly from commitments that the applicant made in the record already.
Exactly. I just
In
read right from the
reply
record
comments.
all your commitments that you made there.
Yep.
The one distinction is in person versus virtual. That's the one that
And
so
that's
everything,
fair.
everything they've said is absolutely, I pulled it right from the record, okay? And the only thing I added in the end was, I want that first conversation, development, that relationship to be in person.
Yeah, Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, the applicant actually met with some emergency responders from the area yesterday to talk about emergency response, and they were in Winnebago, I believe. So they were present. They take it very seriously. They've already started these discussions.
They're listening to you. See, I like these guys already. I mean, they're acting like Minnesota developers. So I want to tell you, I appreciate this project. I went into it a little skeptical at first, but I do appreciate the outreach that you've been having. I'm just making sure, belts and suspenders, as you put it on, and then that's important, I think, here. So, yes, I get it.
Please.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, I do want to say thank you for this question. I agree with you. It's very important. As a former EMT and volunteer firefighter, the boots on the ground approach is incredibly meaningful. So we take that responsibility very seriously as guests in this community. And just as a point of clarification, we met in Blue Earth yesterday.
He raised you.
He did, and I know. I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. So I don't know. I like the decision option it is. I made it flexible so that staff can write the option. It's not going to look any different than that permit condition that's there. But I just want to make sure that we are stamping it by saying it's important to be in person. And
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, a couple comments though. On the revised decision option, the 812 talks more generally about the emergency responders having jurisdiction over the area. In your revised decision option, you talked about the Winnebago and Delavan fire departments. We're pretty sure that Winnebago Fire Department would cover this area. Not so sure about Delavan. Based upon
just going off your record, so I would pull those.
not entirely sure, that's still being developed, and so and not entirely sure that the Winnebago Police Department would respond outside of the city of Winnebago based upon their website. So I think it's more appropriate to keep that condition more general about the responders having jurisdiction, and on Evan's list of things to do is to talk to the county emergency response coordinator and actually figure out who does respond to those areas. We've been meeting with emergency responders as they've been coming and raising their concerns to answer their questions and try to help educate them. But they may or may not be responders that respond to this facility.
I didn't ask staff to have this available to get up. Do you have the decision option to put up there so we can make sure we draft it correctly? So we would just change 1, 2, and 3 on the third line to be emergency responders that have jurisdiction over the facility.
They have Say that again, Commissioner Tuma? Have jurisdiction?
over the facility or the property, I guess. But I think staff can clean that up later. Is there any place else you think it would be changed, Mr. Deere?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, we took the liberty of trying to fold this language in those 3 points primarily into the existing site permit language, and I do have a piece of paper. If I can put it up on the screen, it might be more helpful.
Well, that's a little trickier than it should be.
Here, we have more handouts for commissioners. So what you'll see in this handout is the existing permit condition 812 that talks about the preparation of the emergency response plan. And then Commissioner Tuma, what we tried to do was fold in the plan shall have the process for 1, 2, and 3, as well as talking about the expenses being on the permittee.
We have to get it on the screen somehow, but we can talk about it until we get it. So Commissioner Tuma? Did you have a question?
Actually, why don't we take a 5-minute break and I can talk to staff about the PPA language, and we'll all be good. That's okay with
Okay,
you?
and then Paula will put it on the screen when we get it up, but we'll stand in recess until 10:35 a.m. I don't know what happened. We'll come back from our recess. Commissioner Tuma?
Okay, let's start with PPA first. Everything looks fine. You have the language, Landon, to just put up there to make sure they are fine with it. And then we'll go to the emergency services, the PPA language, I could have done emergency services first and we could have. The short answer to your question, though, is we're fine with the 4 years and 1 year compliance. We just want to make sure the language says what you want it to say.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, appreciate the 4 years. Just a note about usually the annual updates or updates. Typically, the way we've seen it in the past, it hasn't been a permit condition. It's just been a part of the order. It's up to you and how you want to do that. But normally, we see those updates just be part of the order rather than a site permit condition. And that's the way you've done it in the past.
Well, it's going to be in the permit already. I mean, that's what we're asking to put it going forward, so. So I don't know why you wouldn't be okay with having the annual update in the permit. But.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, the applicant's fine. I'm just making you aware of typical past practice. Those updates have, the commission has chosen, in my experience, to put those update requirements as just an order
point versus being in the permit.
Right.
Either way.
Either way.
Banana.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, we could do it.
I don't know if,
Yeah, this is why, when we get to the second one, why I don't like to do it this way, actually drafting permit language and order language, but,
the second, your other part of this, Commissioner Tuma? Do you want to go to that and explain it?
well,
Or explain what you're thinking?
scroll back up, Lan. I'm just trying to solve the problem here. To be, order the permittee to file updates. Is what it should say. Order the permittee to file updates. And then amend the permit at section 8.5 and 8. So we don't cross that language out now, essentially. Just leave the cross-out language in there, I think. That's how it should work, right, Mr. Deere?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, that's right.
Okay. And then on emergency services, I think we'll just leave the permit language, or the order language, as I suggested, as a order point. Okay. Your thing looks really good, but it gives our attorneys a chance to look at it outside of the pressure of this meeting, and we don't try to draft this language. So I think my intent with the language that we just amended for 6B is that this pretty much meets it, but I want my attorneys to look at it. So we're not going to put the language in the order. We're just going to have this more descriptive. We're going to do this. And then if you don't like it, you got recon to fix it.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, I think that works. As long as I believe you already have it in the revised language about the emergency responders having jurisdiction rather than the specific emergency responders.
You grabbed that change already, so it would be Tuma B as modified.
And one other modification, just to make it correct, there should be nothing in the language or in the site permit that talks about suppression of fire, because that's not actually what's done when you respond to BESS conflagration events, the BESS units are designed to contain any fire event that may happen. And the last thing we want them to do is to start spraying water on the batteries or foam or anything else. So we really don't want that to be part of the site permit condition.
I pulled that right from your record, but if you wanted to say something else, you tell me what you wanted to say.
I would just say that we can just, in that section 1, where point number 1, so it's 6B, point number 1.
For responding to fire
For
or
responding to emergencies at the BESS.
Works for me. Madam Chair, I do see my friends from labor over
Yeah.
here, so I think we want to hear from them. I gave all these guys praise for being able to handle the permit language, but I also want to make sure that they're going to provide ongoing jobs for Minnesotans. I think are you going to have actual people employed at this facility full-time down in Winnipeg? How many are you going to employ full-time?
So the exact number, Chair Sieben and Commissioner Tuma, is still being determined based on the final details of the facility, but we do expect to have full-time security staff as well as full-time technicians available.
Excellent. But we also want to make sure good Minnesota regional labor is being used. So you guys had some comments in here, but you're here, so what do you have to say?
Mr. Kajewski, did you want to begin? Please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners, for the time to speak. I'm Richard Kajewski, the Director of Government Affairs for the North Central States Regional Council of Carpenters. I speak in support of the joint application of Northern Crescent Solar's generating system site permit and battery storage system on behalf of us and the International Union of Operating Engineers Local 49. We have met with Northern Crescent Solar. They have assured us that they strive to employ local labor and union members for the construction of all their projects. The construction and operation of this 150 megawatt solar energy generating system and 50 megawatt battery energy storage system in Faribault County, Minnesota would provide substantial hours of work for trained local union members. We applaud Northern Crescent Solar's commitment to provide stable, clean energy to the region, supporting Minnesota's transition to a low-carbon future. The addition of battery storage will ensure reliable electricity delivery and grid stability, benefiting both residents and businesses throughout the Faribault County and beyond. As leading representatives of skilled tradespeople throughout the region, we recognize the significant economic and workforce benefits this project could bring to Faribault County and surrounding communities. The construction phase alone could create hundreds of good-paying, family-supporting jobs for local carpenters, operators, and related trades. These jobs will not only provide immediate income for Minnesota families, but also foster long-term career growth through on-the-job training and apprenticeship opportunities. Both the carpenters and operators urge the Commission to approve the joint application for site permits, recognizing the project's positive impact on local employment, economic development, and the environment. We look forward to continued conversation and partnership with Northern Crescent Solar and other stakeholders to ensure the successful completion and operation of this important project. Thank you for the consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Kajewski and Mr. Franco.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair Sieben and Commissioners. My name is Lucas Franco. I'm here on behalf of Leuna, Minnesota and North Dakota. I'll keep my comments very brief and echo much of what my colleague has just said. But first and foremost, we want to thank the development team at Primergy for their commitment to work with local labor unions and other stakeholders to maximize local socioeconomic benefits. This project will create approximately 200 family supporting jobs, which is good news for local workers, good news for the local community. I actually polled data this morning, and we have about 575 members within 50 miles of the project, of which have transferable skills and are eager for good work opportunities like this. Additionally, I think their outreach and engagement with us and other workforce stakeholders speaks to the previous discussion led by Commissioner Tuma. Their engagement shows us a commitment to being good neighbors and stewards of the land that they're developing for this project. Second, we're particularly excited about the project as a large and innovative hybrid facility, a solar and storage facility. We think these are the types of projects we need to create a reliable supply of clean energy. We believe that the applicant meets the statutory requirements for a site permit for both a solar energy generating system and a battery storage system, and we encourage support for this project, and thank you for the opportunity to comment.
Thank you very much, both for being here. I noticed that Local 49 also is supportive, but I don't think they're here today, but appreciate their support as well. Mr. Deere, my question is about the your construction date start. Is there any chance, considering how Congress is actively messing up the IRA tax credits that would effectuate and help this project, is there any possibility that you could speed up construction and start before Q2 of 2026? Or anything else you wanted to comment on your timeline?
Yeah, Chair Stephen, thank you so much for that question. Obviously, what's going on in Washington is of great import to us in this project. While we remain very confident in the prospects for this project and have continuing ongoing conversations with potential off-takers, certainly any changes to the IRA would change our approach to building this project. It will create substantial difficulties for having an accelerated timeline. We do remain confident that we have the ability to meet these accelerated timelines once the language is finalized. Certainly, it will be challenging. This is true, but we were building solar before the IRA. We look forward to bringing reliable, clean energy to Minnesota, even if the IRA changes.
That's good news. So you think even if they totally mess up the tax credits, which it appears like they're doing, you still are confident that the project will move forward?
We believe that at this time. Again, pending final language, we'll determine how we respond, but we do believe that we can be flexible, nimble, and achieve all of the goals for this project.
Have you been following the discussion around the foreign source components of the solar panels, and is that a concern, and any comments on that?
Certainly supply chains are well integrated across the globe these days. For this particular project, we have had the opportunity to take advantage of some of the safe harboring language that would still allow us to bring in foreign developed panels. That being said, we do have relationships with US-based panel manufacturers, and we have the ability of sourcing panels from US manufacturers if required.
But you don't already have the panels sourced somewhere, like, ready to go?
At this stage in development, it's a bit premature to kind of lock in those contracts. However, we have already initiated those conversations.
Good. Well, thank you for your continued efforts. Commissioner Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair Sieben. I'm curious about how fast you think you'll be able to get a generator interconnection agreement through MISO.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Sullivan, that's also a great question. We are actually in the final stages of negotiating our interconnection agreement. There's a final study that MISO is performing for the interconnection facilities, or sorry, not the interconnection facilities, but the network upgrade facilities study is what's currently ongoing. That will establish the timeline costs, such to that nature. We expect that to wrap up in the next couple of weeks and then execute the IA shortly thereafter.
So you don't foresee any delays because of the GIA process?
Not through the GIA process, no.
Okay, great, thank you.
A good point, too, is, you go back, this is probably been made possible in a significant part by the Huntley-Wilmart power line that went down there, because this is right outside that substation where Huntley-Wilmart originates from, so.
Commissioner Hung.
Thank you, Chair Sieben. Yeah, I think I'll echo the Commissioner Tooman. I talked to our staff. Our staff commend your activity in the public engagement. I think I really appreciate your sincere public engagement, because public engagement of the applicant makes huge difference in the outcome of the whole regulatory process. Being said, I have a particular question to you. Your primary way of acquiring land is leasing the land from the landowner. I heard from public that there was a concern that some delayed project, they may not get any payment for a long time. So have you ever thought about how to deal with this situation in case you cannot build within the time frame that you promised in the initial application, because sometimes these people who signing the deal doesn't understand that they are not able to negotiate another lease with other parties.
Chair Stephen and Commissioner Hom, that's a very important thing to bring up. In this particular instance, our leases actually have a timeline for the payments that is locked into those contractual agreements, such that regardless of the schedule of the project from a construction standpoint, we have commitments that we have to make, and so we have actually moved into full payment at this time.
Thank you.
Commissioner Partridge.
Thank you, Chair Sieben. I want to echo a lot of the things that have been said. I think it's wonderful that you have been working so closely with labor. Battery energy storage systems are going to be increasingly important and common in Minnesota and across our region. And we've had applicants in the past who've really struggled to communicate to the public their plan for safety, for maintaining, a safe environment in a safe community. And I want to thank you for what I've heard was just that you did a really excellent job of explaining your plan and the things that you've done, including these containment vessels that house the batteries, so that you're really proactively making sure that you can keep the community safe. I also want to thank a member of the public who came to a public meeting who was a volunteer firefighter who, as I understand it, gave you really detailed, specific questions. And by all accounts, you were able to provide really detailed, specific answers. And so that is just such a great example of how we can support these beneficial projects by having that open communication, being realistic about people's concerns and addressing those real concerns up front. So I just wanted to thank you and to say you've shown an example for hopefully other developers to be really out there and upfront about the safety procedures and mechanisms you have in place, and talking, very candidly with the public about your safety plan and response, and acknowledging their real concerns. So I appreciate that. I just wanted to say that and to thank the local volunteer firefighter who came so prepared with such detailed questions that I think hopefully will help her community understand that you're all working together to make sure that this important energy project is also a safe energy project for the community. So that's all I had to say.
Commissioner Sullivan.
Thank you. One last question about MISO stuff. I'm curious, it may be in the record, I didn't see it, but I'm curious if you could share what your accreditation increased when you moved from just a solar project, and then, MISO is now, will be accrediting those differently. I'm wondering if you can share how the solar component increased the accreditation, like how significant that was. I'm assuming it was very significant, so I'm just curious if you can share it.
Just to clarify, Commissioner Sullivan and Chair Seaman, are you referring to the ELCC accreditation?
Exactly, yes.
Okay, yes. So as this was filed as a joint solar and storage application, a hybrid application, that ELCC contribution has only really changed at the MISO level. The individual project attributes are determined by their calculations. Having a hybrid facility does change the allocation of those credits, but the facility as a whole benefits from the ELCC as MISO kind of stipulates it, and as sort of it is accredited. The specific details on that I'm not as familiar with, so I'm reticent to offer something that's incorrect, but I can say that we do find that both facilities have strong commercial interest, both from a capacity standpoint as well as from a power generation standpoint.
Yeah, thank you. The reason I asked that question is because I think going forward we're going to see more of these, and I just think it's a good data point for us to have in our heads, that these are facilities that are accredited at a higher level, and they get more capacity credit, and I just curious if you could share, but I thank you for what you did provide. That's all.
Commissioner Tuma, do you have a motion?
Madam Chair, I would move decision option 1, 3, 6, including 6B as amended and 6C as amended.
So you're putting in 6,
B, not A,
oh, not A,
not A,
sorry.
but just 6B and C as amended, both of them as amended, and then 8.
Commissioners, is there any discussion of the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion prevails 5-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Best wishes. We'll take a short 5-minute break and then take up agenda item 2 in about 5 minutes. The commission will come back from its recess, and Mr. Harbaugh, please introduce the next item.
Good morning, Chair Sieben and Commissioners. Item number 2 is docket numbers GS 23-414 and TL 23-415 involving Iron Pine Solar Power LLC in the matter of the company's joint application for a site permit for the up to 325 megawatt solar facility energy generating system and a route permit for an approximately 1 mile, 230 kilovolt transmission line in Pine County, Minnesota. The questions before the Commission are, should the Commission adopt the administrative law judge's findings of fact, conclusion of law, and recommendation? Should the Commission find that the environmental assessment and the record created at the public hearings address the issues identified in the scoping decision? Should the Commission issue a site permit for the 325 megawatt Iron Pine solar energy generating system? And should the Commission issue a route permit for the 230 kilovolt transmission line? Staff has the following opening remarks. Staff filed a revised decision paper, briefing paper, and proposed site permit. The original briefing paper and proposed site permit listed the PPA permit condition as 5.6. This was a typo. The revised briefing paper and proposed site permit correctly lists the permit condition as 5.7. Also, there was a decision option filed yesterday afternoon by Commissioner Tuma. Commissioners have received a copy, and copies have been made available near the back of the room. The decision option moves the proposed PPA permit condition to 8.15 of the proposed site permit instead of 5.7, and amends the section 5.1 of the visual screening plan to include location-specific supplemental screening. Staff has no further remarks and is open for questions.
If the parties would please come forward for appearances. And we'll start on my far right, and then we'll also turn to folks online. First, we'll start with you, please, ma'am.
Good morning. I'm Monica Howard with Swift Current Energy, the parent company developing the Iron Sign Solar Power Project, and I am their Senior Director of Permitting.
Good morning, Chair Sieben, Commissioners, Haley Waller-Pitts, Frederickson, and Byron on behalf of Iron Pine Solar Power.
Good morning, Commissioners. Ray Kirsch, Energy Infrastructure Permitting here at the Commission.
Good morning, Chair Sieben and Commissioners. Lucas Franco on behalf of Leuna, Minnesota, and North Dakota.
Good morning, Commissioners. Richard Kajewski on behalf of the North Central States Regional Council of Carpenters and the Operating Engineers Local 49.
And Mr. Lippert or Mr. Applegate, are you online and can hear us?
Yes, I don't know if I can turn my camera on. Yeah, it says I can't. But this is Kelly Applegate. I'm the Commissioner of Natural Resources for the Mille Lacs Band of Ojibwe. Yeah, good morning, Chair Sieben and Commissioners.
Commissioner Applegate, thanks so much for joining. We'll see if we can get you a way to turn your camera on. We appreciate your participation, and Mr. Harbaugh didn't mention it, but there are some late filed ex parte communications in the record that that we'll want to talk about, or I'll want to ask you questions about, if you can stick around for a little bit here. Let's start, though, with Commissioner Tuma and questions you have on the project overall, Commissioner Tuma.
Yes, and I appreciate Mr. Applegate being on. Just so you know, Mr. Applegate, for some reason our sound is really loud from you, so just when you do talk, tone it down a little whisper. It was perfectly fine. It's not your fault. It's our fault on our end. But you come across as a very loud voice. So.
Okay, I'll tone it down.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Our system has been kind of gnarly lately, so. Ms. Waller-Pitts, I got a few things I want to talk to you about. I assume you're okay with the discussion we had on the prior docket about the visual screening. I would assume the same goes, that your client, we're watching it, and that is, of all the properties, the most impacted.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, thank you for the question. By way of update, the landowner and that resident spoke at the scoping meeting for the project, which I imagine is where the language came from. Immediately after the scoping meeting, the project team reached out to that landowner And we talked about this a little bit in Mr. Shannon's direct testimony, but we have a good neighbor agreement with that landowner now. So that has been kind of resolved. The company followed up on it. We're in good shape there.
Excellent, and I assume you're okay with the PPA language as developed by Mr. Deere?
Yes, we appreciate the syncing up of the 4 years there.
The other two things I want to talk about is deer fence a little bit, and I thought we've kind of resolved this issue, and by recollection, it was Louis Solar. I think you were on that, if I remember. Maybe I'm wrong, but we had talked about deer fences and heights of deer fences. So
I think Miss Brusvin is in the back of the room laughing.
yeah,
Because it was her,
Oh, okay.
actually.
I won't call her up. That would be unfair to her. But my recollection, the language that we have in this permit was the language that was developed earlier permits regarding working in consultation with the DN. And that, the idea is we don't care if deer get into your facility. It's the exit out of the facility that is important. I think Mr. Danielinsky, who is the property owner in the northeast corner, would be happy. Ran the deer right out. He was talking about continuing to hunt on his property, so maybe we'll have a fence right out onto his property, and it will just, by the way, 10-point buck coming out right now, and he'd be probably more than happy as a good neighbor agreement. But my understanding is that language is the language, and I'm fine with it. I'm assuming you're working with the DNR. We've talked about fences not having to be barbed wire on the top, and we've talked about them being lower and just have exit plans. And by the way, when I drove by, saw 2 deer, had to slow down, and saw about 20 turkeys on Swanson Road. So there is wildlife in this area. It is a unique piece of property that you're in there, and it's a perfect place, for my consideration, for a solar farm. So we're going to still work with the DNR, right?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, yes, certainly Iron Pine will continue to work with and coordinate with the DNR on the project, including the fencing, and has no issues with the permit condition as it's written here and as it's been applied for other projects as well.
And I hope the DNR gets a message. 10-foot fence is probably not anything we're going to force on this project, and I don't think should be forced on these projects. If deer get in there, some of the landowners are more than happy. I remember down in Louis Solar that the farmers in the neighborhood says, yes, run the deer in there and keep them in there during the harvest season, so we don't have to deal with them ruining our corn. So I assume that'll continue. So I'm not going to worry about the fence issue, but was highlighted here. I just want the DNR message. We're pretty happy with where things have played out.
Can I interrupt you to ask, is Ms. Bump on or here from the DNR? Or if you want to come forward and, since Commissioner Tuma was asking about the fence. Welcome. If you could please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Chair Sieben, Commissioners. I'm Samantha Bump, representing the Minnesota DNR. Regarding our fencing, I have been told that we would not be issuing shooting and removal permits inside the perimeter for deer that do not enter the facility.
Say that again?
That we would not be issuing shooting or removal permits inside the perimeter for deer was what I've been told by our wildlife management folk for that region.
But you're okay with you developing a plan to remove the deer and making sure the fences are in good locations. Concern down at Louis, when I remember it was, we had fences that were exiting out on the roads. So we don't want to exit out on 35W. We want it someplace that is safe for the deer and safe for the general public.
Definitely.
Your folks worked on that before. I'm assuming they're continue to work with them.
Yes, we'll definitely keep working with them on it. A 10-foot fence is something we've voiced our opinion on that we feel like would be the best avoidance measure for this issue, but we're willing to try and find other ways around this if that's not feasible, but that's definitely
I think that was what my read of the record, and Commissioner Tuma, help me out here. I was thinking that the DNR was still recommending a 10-foot fence. And Ms. Bump, it sounds like you are. And Ms. Waller-Pitts, what's the applicant's position on a 10-foot fence? Is it, like, what other problems do you have with just making the fence higher? Or are you going to?
Thank you, Chair Sieben. The current plans for this project are an 8-foot fence, which is consistent with the other solar projects the Commission has permitted recently. The 8 feet balances the need to comply with the NESC standards and then also landowner needs and the aesthetic impacts as well.
But I don't understand what you're saying, like you still prefer an 8-foot fence because that's what landowners want around it, or I understand like you don't always do a 10-foot fence, or other projects haven't done a 10-foot fence, but why not 10-foot here?
Sure.
If that's what the DNR wants.
Yeah, Chair Sieben, thank you. And I'm not going to speak for the DNR, but I think the DNR's comments here are consistent with the comments that they've made on other projects as well. So on 10 feet. And for this project, just like other solar projects in Minnesota, the plan is an 8-foot fence. And again, it's balancing the landowner needs and other provisions in the Commission's permit that require the permittees to assess and minimize visual impacts as well.
Commissioner,
Deers are not taking deer. You're not going to take deer. You're going to release deer. You're going to let deer move through the facility, and you can also have a plan if there's some deer that get caught to move them out. That was what we worked out in other projects. So.
Right. Madam Chair, can I ask a question on this? Ms. Waller-Pitts, so I am following it, I think, consistently with Commissioner Tuma, that the DNR wants a 10-foot fence in order to issue permits to take deer, which is defined as either killing or capturing them in one way or another and removing them. And Ms. Waller-Pitts, if I'm understanding you're saying we're not doing that. We would open the gates, let the deer out. We're not going to try to take them, so we don't need that permit. Is that what you're saying?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner, yes.
Great.
and Ms. Bump, is that your understanding and you're okay with that then?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Partridge, I'm not sure if the 10-foot fence is the deciding factor on a deer permit to take. I would have to discuss that with them. It's my understanding that a 10-foot fence is our standard recommendation, not only for solar facilities, but for nurseries, and there is literature that is available proving that this is the best option to avoid the deer from getting in, and the deer do get in over an 8-foot fence, so that's why we continue to recommend a 10-foot fence.
Can I follow up? Okay, so I did read through this issue and went down the rabbit hole, and I think in the record it said we will not issue a permit to take without a 10-foot fence. That was within the record.
Okay.
I guess my question is, what is the damage you're concerned about with a deer getting into the facility?
Well, from my understanding is getting them out isn't always the easiest. Sure. We've tried ramps at some facilities, and that is definitely not preferred. To get the deer out of such a large fenced area takes some maneuvering.
So the point is either you try to force or try to persuade us to require a 10-foot fence to try to keep the deer out.
Completely, yes.
Or like deal with the 8-foot fence, and then there's less visual impact. I assume it costs less, but you let more deer in, and then you have to find a way to get them out. So there's like no real easy
Here's the big difference,
answer here, but
the 10-foot fence came about because of toxic waste sites and orchards and nurseries who don't want deer in, okay? Have one right down the road from us, about 5 miles, and they were shooting deer, okay? They were getting over their 8-foot fence, and they were prosecuted because they were shooting deer in their orchard, okay? And you don't want that. We don't want that either. They're not going to be shooting any deer in a solar panel, and there's going to be nice forage in there, isn't there not? There's going to be good Minnesota cover, and the deer are going to like it, and they're going to jump in there, and they're going to eat it, okay? And you know what? We're okay with that. Unlike the orchard guy, okay, we don't mind deer eating our forage, okay? It's actually pretty good. They'll probably bring sheep in there or something. Who knows what to do? They're going to do to manage the vegetation. So I don't think we're offended that deer get in there. We just want to know that when they're in there in this big open enclosure, that there's a fair way to get out. And that's what has been done in other projects, figuring out fencing, figuring out wildlife management plans, which is already in the permit. So the 10-foot fence is totally different here. We don't need a 10-foot fence. Frankly, if it was up to me, I would have a 5-foot fence and let the deer in, okay? But there's electric code that requires fencing, and so we're trying to find the medium balance. I thought we had found the balance, so that's why I was a little surprised, and you're new at the job. This was a balance that was developed with your predecessor, and so I thought we had reached a balance. So when I saw a 10-foot fence, I just wanted to highlight it. We don't want a 10-foot fence. We don't want to pay for a 10-foot fence, and we don't care that the deer get in. And I think that's the applicant's position. And they're willing to work with you to figure out how to get the deer out if they happen to get in there. And they're not going to do any damage. They're like sheep. They're going to just wander around, enjoy the shade, and eat the good Minnesota cover crop that they put down. So that's how I'm thinking. Nothing more to say.
I understand that. Commissioner Partridge, did you have something?
No, I agree with Commissioner Tuma. I think if Ms. Wallerpit and her client are willing to help get the deer out, if there's any issues, then I'm perfectly happy with whatever fence. I don't see the need for a 10-foot fence.
Ms. Bump, on other issues related to the site and route permit, are there any comments that you wanted to provide that it seems like your concerns were taken into account related to turtles and other environmental impacts, but anything additional you wanted to provide?
Thank you, Chair Sieben. It's my understanding everything is being taken care of. There was a comment on the grouse lecking area, which we could speak to if.
Yeah, please do, and then we'll call in Mille Lacs to also speak to that.
Thank you. So historically, this area has been known to have grouse lecking. However, the sharp-tailed grouse population in this area is extremely diminished. As one wildlife manager has mentioned, seeing a sharp-tailed grouse in this area is like seeing a unicorn. That being said, any habitat management plan that would facilitate the sharp-tailed grouse population to come back would also facilitate, other bird species and would overall be better for the habitat in that area as well. So we aren't against doing a habitat management plan or a vegetation management plan in that direction. But as far as specific to the sharp-tailed grouse at the current population status, it's not a huge concern. If the population does return, which is obviously the goal, it would be very beneficial to have, the proper habitat there. It's unlikely that they would lack under the solar panels itself. They're not known to proceed with their lekking activities. If you're familiar with lekking, would you like me? It's yeah, I understand. It's like their mating dance, to attract females. The males put it on. It attracts the females. Make baby birds, birds and bees, They like a lot of space to do it, shorter grass, They don't like to do it under trees or bush, so that shows us that they would unlikely lack under solar panels. They would potentially nest under solar panels, but we do not feel like they would proceed with their lacking activities.
I don't
under them.
recall, I know there's a vegetation management plan in the permit. Is there a habitat management plan in the existing permit? And could you incorporate, Commissioner Tuma knows the record better than I do, I think, but could you incorporate what is needed for the grouse species in the habitat management plan that will be developed with the applicant?
Thank you, Chair Stephen. Yeah, it's my understanding there is a habitat management plan associated with the permit, and we would happily work with the tribes and the applicant to get us in a good direction to potentially create better habitat for the species that has historically been found here.
That is in 4.3.16, and staff just chatted it to me, and we know that the grouse are a game bird, and so that will be incorporated in that section of the site permit. Ms. Waller-Pitts, I'm going to call on the Mille Lacs Band and their comments that were filed, but on this issue of game birds and the habitat management plan, anything you wanted to add before we turn to the Mille Lacs?
Thank you, Chair Stephen. Just to note that the site permit condition as it's written is the company is fully prepared to comply with that.
And work with the parties that are listed in there, including the Bowser and the DNR, I assume, is in there too in some way. Or they're not explicitly, but I bet they are in some way involved in the development of the habitat management plan. Is that correct, Ms. Bump?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Is the DNR actively involved in the development of the habitat management plan?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Okay. If I could turn to the Mille Lacs Band, Commissioner Applegate, I appreciate your comments that were originally in the OAH report that weren't reflected in our briefing papers, but then your communication with our staff that was filed ex parte, and apologize that you weren't originally maybe notified that the docket was coming up. So with that apology, please tell us any thoughts you have overall on the project, and thank you for being here on short notice.
Oh, certainly. And good morning, Chair Sieben and commissioners. As I was listening to Commissioner Tuma, I tend to agree with his analysis about, a lower fence, like an 8-foot fence or less, being required for the project. The Mille Lacs Band were very interested in multi-use benefits for the existing wildlife that occur on the landscape there. There's some unique landscape out in Pine County. There's a plethora of wildlife. A lot of that wildlife moves about on our tribal lands. As you all know, we have, our hunting, fishing, and gathering rights guaranteed by treaty and trust responsibility. It's I think of our greater interest, that this proposal looks to provide some habitat. I think you could plant maybe even native lupins for restoration of Karner blue butterflies, milkweed for monarch butterflies, have some, we're pretty optimistic that one day the sharp-tailed grouse will rebound. we have to be, we have to make that habitat possible, though. Sharp-tailed grouse, and thank you for the explanation of kind of what they do out there. They get on their leks and early in the mornings, and they dance and they mate, and then those females move off the lek into neighboring habitats and incubate their eggs and raise their young. Pheasants compete with them for nesting sites. Often ringneck pheasants will take over their nests. So there's a lot of challenges that sharp-tailed grouse have out there. We've learned, though, that swift current energy, you're looking at doing, maybe even reducing the footprint of your facility due to improved technology. And, wherever we could partner up to maybe choose the most open sites to preserve those, that's what the sharp-tailed grouse like. They like, at least a half to a mile of open habitat, and then they go right in the center of that in short grass, and then that's where they do their lekking. So with that, and thoughts about deer, it was really interesting to hear that there's some requirements for fencing around these facilities. I don't see the sense or purpose in that, because a deer is not going to, I wouldn't think, really damage any of the infrastructure within, they're not known to chew on wires or scrape their horns, I don't think, on any of the structures in there. But what I guess I would recommend is maybe going with the 8-foot fence and having some openings every so often, so that not only deer, but like turtles, other small mammals could move freely about without those restrictions. I think that's just being a responsible land manager in terms of wildlife considerations. But otherwise, the Mille Lacs Band, we have no other issues with the Iron Pine solar power proposal. We think it's good, that alternative energies are coming onto the grid, and we're open to being involved in any habitat management plans that would be put forward. We have a fully capable staff here at our Natural Resources Department at the Mille Lacs Band that could also sit in those meetings and be a voice in developing any habitat management plans you have going forward for the project. So with that, I really appreciate the opportunity to comment here, and would entertain any questions if you have them. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Applegate. I have a couple things. The first is I appreciate your willingness to engage on the what's it called, beneficial habitat plan, and the vegetation management plan. And so perhaps we could incorporate the band's name into that section of the permit so that your ability to work on it and review it would be incorporated. And then I do have a new decision option that I'll ask you after I talk to the applicants about. And I would hope that the Mille Lacs Band would be willing to also engage on this. And I apologize, Ms. Waller-Pitts, for the lateness of this decision option. And Lana can put it up when it's ready. But what it does is ask the applicant to file a plan to replace trees that are removed from the construction of the project, or the projects. So for the transmission line, I noticed in the EA, there will be the removal of, it didn't say a number that I saw, but there will be a removal of trees for the associated transmission line, which is about a mile long, and then also some tree removal for the clearing of the site. And the idea here is that, similar to the vegetation management plan or the other plans that I keep forgetting the name of, a plan would be developed by the applicant in consultation with the Mille Lacs Band, the DNR, and the County Soil and Water Conservation District to replace trees that are removed. And file that plan on a similar schedule, so it'd be 14 days before the pre-construction meeting. And I know that this is kind of new for for a solar facility in the transmission line, but we did something similar with oil pipeline with line 3, and the idea being that trees could be, as trees are removed, they would be cataloged or counted in some way, and then trees would be planted in the general vicinity of the area, the Kettle River watershed, which is a part of the St. Croix River watershed, and the applicant could work with Mille Lacs, the DNR, and the Soil and Water District to develop a plan to plant those trees in the area. Again, it's kind of new. Maybe I should just stop talking. But the EA, I thought, by the way, Mr. Kirsch was really well done and did have description of how some areas there would need to be tree removal. So first, Ms. Waller-Pitts, again, apologies for not pre-filing this. But curious if you have any thoughts or if you think this is something you could do.
I'll provide a few initial thoughts and maybe start with a clarification and just a note, right, that to the extent that the project area is not used for facilities, it reverts to the landowner and they may decide to continue farming like they're currently doing, right? So I don't know that we would have the ability to plant trees, certainly not within the solar arrays, right? And then not on any area that wasn't used for the project because it reverts to the landowner. And the site, setting aside the transmission line site itself, is almost entirely in soybean production right now. So there's very little tree clearing associated with the solar farm. And then with respect, just so that we can try to understand, with respect to replacement, would the replacement occur kind of within the county somewhere, or I guess I'm hoping for a little clarification on the geographic scope there.
Well, I was thinking because it's in such a special, and you and others know this better than I, but the Kettle River watershed, which is, I said, and is in the EA, is part of the St. Croix River, Wild and Scenic River watershed. Like in that general vicinity, I certainly didn't think it needed to be it can't be in the right of way, or in the, in the explicit like project site, but just in that area, and you could develop a plan with the Mille Lacs Band and the DNR and the Soil and Water District to figure out where you'd plant the trees. And I did not purposely put like explicit like diameter of trees that are removed or anything like that. I assume you would, because it's kind of new, you'd have to figure it out and you'd file a plan, and then like your other plans in the permit, others weigh in on them, and you move forward.
Chair Stephen, thank you. We're processing in real time here. So Iron Pine Solar doesn't have any land rights outside of the project, right? So if there's tree replanting, it would need to be done in coordination with a government entity or private conservation easement or something like that. As I understand it, the applicant is open to doing that, but would hope to have some flexibility on actually doing the replanting or just working with a local group to help them do that. And I'll turn to Ms. Howard here and see if she has anything else to say on that.
Thank you. And just echoing what was said, that we could be in agreement for a tree replanting plan. We have coordinated these before in other jurisdictions, but that, again, we can't plant them in or around the array due to, shading concerns and things of that nature, as well as in the Gentai area. We are looking at some screening opportunities, so there might be a way we can incorporate it in those locations. But that also the ability to coordinate with, a park system or a conservation district to meet that obligation would be appreciated.
Yeah, that's kind of the thinking. And Commissioner Applegate, this is new for a project like this, but I'm curious if the Mille Lacs Band would, your experts would be willing to work on this too, or help develop a plan and weigh in on tree replacement proposal.
Yes, absolutely. We have a forester on staff who's very knowledgeable about the tree species that would occur in that area, and also what species to avoid. Like oaks are getting oak wilt, ashes are getting emerald ash borer, all of that. So he's got a lot of technical expertise in that area. And we could certainly be at the table to help recommend species to plant, and maybe even some understory plantings as well, vegetative habitats and whatever. So,
Great.
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Ms. Bump, I assume the DNR does this, so I assume you're okay with this?
Chair Stephen, yeah, okay with this, and something we'll figure out the details with in the vegetation management plan as well.
Great. Ms. Waller-Pitts, any concerns or additional things?
Thank you, Chair Stephen. I think it would be helpful to the applicant to provide a little more specificity on any trees, right? I don't know if that's a tree versus a sapling, 1 inch versus a large tree, to have some minimum there just for ease of administration.
That can't be developed in the plan?
Yeah, that was what we did on line 3. It was developed, and just go to line 3. That's how we expect it to be kind of done along that line, so.
So you think it's good keeping it vague?
I think it's vague. Vague is actually better for you, because you'll have a chance to talk it out. If you have us decide, I'll say every little sapling. So I think you'd rather work it out with Ms. Bump. She's much more smarter and intelligent than we are. So.
Thank you, Chair Stephen, Commissioner Tuma. With the clarification that it can be part of the plan, that's helpful. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think this is positive, and I appreciate your willingness of all the parties to work. Other Commissioner Partridge and then Commissioner Hahn.
Thanks. I actually had a question back on the beneficial habitat component of the permit. So I think this is a little bit for Commissioner Applegate, if he's still available. And then also for Ms. Bump, I think in listening to your explanation of the mating practices of grouse, which was very informative, so thank you. The beneficial habitat portion of the permit for Commissioner Applegate, if you don't have it in front of you, just says that the permittee will implement site restoration and management practices that provide for native perennial vegetation and foraging habitat beneficial to game birds, songbirds, pollinators, etc. And given that the grouse is unique in that it has kind of different areas of habitat that it does different important deeds in. Would it be helpful to just add something expanding upon foraging, or maybe just taking out foraging and just say habitat beneficial to game birds? And then in theory, the applicant would work with you, Commissioner Applegate, and then Ms. Bump with the DNR to figure out what are the best opportunities to maybe help facilitate the return of the grouse to that area.
Yeah, I think that could work. Just leaving it vague and saying that habitat would be considered for sharp-tailed grouse. I think maybe you want to be specific about that, because if you're doing a planting, you wouldn't want to plant, shrubs or trees or any tall type of vegetation if you had the hopes of restoring a sharp-tailed grouse lek. They would want, kind of smaller prairie grasses in there and smaller forbs in the section of, restoration for where you would want the lek to possibly be restored to.
Okay. And Ms. Bump, would that be helpful from your perspective if we just made that more broad to habitat, beneficial habitat there? And then I think, Chair Sieben, was it your intent to add that the company work with the Mille Lacs band as well in that portion of the permit? Yeah.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Partridge. Yeah, we are definitely interested in working with the Mille Lacs band to help develop a habitat for the sharp-tailed grouse. From what I've been told, by our wildlife management experts, we may not be able to develop a habitat management plan specific to lekking in that area because we do not feel very positive in the fact that they will lek under solar panels, given the fact that they do not like to lek under trees and shrubs. However, providing nesting habitat or along the edges of the solar farm, like the surrounding area where there's more open areas, would be beneficial to develop lekking habitat.
Okay. Yeah, it's just one word removed to make it more broad, because it sounded like Commissioner Applegate was talking about perhaps trying to preserve some of those open areas, and I think Ms. Howard kind of nodded, no, maybe not.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Partridge, just to clarify, the open areas outside of the arrays that are not used for the project revert to the landowner.
Okay,
So we don't
see.
have any ability to develop conservation habitat there.
I see. Okay, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is Commissioner Applegate again. Yeah, thank you for that clarification, because that's what we weren't clear on, because we thought maybe you were going to do some habitat restoration on some of those open areas. And if it reverts to the landowner, then that's if they're in current farm production or what have you, then that's their call on what to do with that land. So.
Okay.
That helps.
Yeah, thank you. That clarifies for me as well.
Thank you, Chair Sieben. So same question I asked before. So most of your land is leased, or all of the lands are leased, except the transmission line portion, you got an easement. In that case, what is your current contract? What is the landowner's right in case you have a delay in construction or in service?
Sure. I think this project might be a little unique to some others in that we have a single landowner lease agreement for the array. There is a like a short-term option or, sunset clause on that agreement such that if things get delayed, we would renegotiate or release the lease.
So landowner has a clear right to renegotiate without your willingness to renegotiate. Because I think we are seeing more and more of the extension of these permits, but also we have to pay attention to landowners' right. Unless landowner has a unilateral right to exercise their land right, I think we have to put that in our consideration in the long run on this project. So that's why I'm just asking. So in your answer, does landowner have unilateral right to renegotiate if it doesn't happen?
Correct. There's expressed terms in the agreement that are very transparent about landowner rights and our rights to negotiate or extend based on unforeseen circumstances.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Waller-Pitts, why is the transmission right-of-way wider than normal in this application? It's 160 feet instead of 150 feet. And could we limit it to 150 feet so you have to cut down less trees to replant somewhere else?
Chair Sieben, thank you. I understand part of that is a temporary easement, and 160-foot right-of-way is within the realm of what's done on a 230 kV line as well.
Excuse me, just to add on to that, there are a few wetlands within that corridor, and so having an established wider corridor gives us some leeway and ability to minimize impacts to those regulated features. So I wouldn't necessarily say it'd be a blanket clearing of trees within that full easement area. It's to allow for some flexibility.
So that's actually really helpful because maybe the wider right-of-way means you could have less impact on the surrounding environment than narrowing it because you can like shift it around.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean you're necessarily going to like make a permanent right-of-way of 160 feet along the entirety of the transmission corridor.
Correct. Absolutely.
Okay, then I guess then I'm good not changing that. Other questions? Commissioners, should we
Ready to take a stab at it if I think I got everything, but I could be wrong.
okay.
So
Deliberation, Commissioner Tuma, a motion?
this is what I'm thinking right now is decision option 1, 2. 6 is now where it gets a little complicated. That is the way he drafted his page. We're modifying the attached permit.
Can you speak up a little?
Yes, sorry about that. And I would do Tuma new 1, which is the PPA language as amended. So it's the 1 year in the order of keeping us up to date on what the PPA is. And do you have a PPA? I should have asked that first.
No, sir.
And then 4 years, so the same language we had in the prior docket. Then I would have amend the site and route permits to include consultation with the Mille Lacs Band of DNR on vegetation and wildlife management matters. And again, very broad. I'll let the staff slip that into the permits where it needs to be, but we're adding Mille Lacs as a consultation on some of the stuff we talked about today.
And the DNR.
In the DNR. I think the DNR is mostly in there, but we'll make sure that on vegetation and beneficial. So we're consistent with your decision option on the trees, and that's the next one is Siebens' decision option on
New 9.
new 9, and then also decision option 8.
And remove the word foraging in that part that Commissioner Partridge said. I can't remember where.
At 4.3.16, I
Yes.
believe, remove the word foraging.
Because that was elegant, but a lot. Let's ask the applicant and any parties if they have any questions about the motion or any concerns about anything we left out. Ms. Waller-Pitts.
Chair Stephen, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, Commissioner Tuma said decision option 5 with the changes that were discussed.
6, and then, so we're
6, but not 6A. No.
no, 6, 6-1, Tuma new 1, but not 6.
Can we put that on the screen, Lana? Because I don't, say that again, Commissioner Tuma?
So we're doing decision option 6 for this one, okay? Which is issue the site permit with the following modifications. So it's drafted a little different than the first one. And those modifications, not 6A, okay? I agree with you, the fence is fine. I was trying to make a point. Fencing should not be a problem. But we will be doing Tuma new 1, the PPA language, as amended in the other docket. So it's the 1 annual compliance filing on the order and the permit language as we've amended it for 4 years, okay?
Does your new one, Commissioner Tuma, adopt the ALJ's findings of fact?
Yes.
It does.
That I think is done in number, of course, I got so many pages up here. That's
Oh.
done, number 1 is adopt the ALJ's findings. So we're adopting the ALJ's finding of fact. The ALJ is fine or not making any changes to that.
It's just, the numbering is just confusing. Your Tuma new 1 isn't 1 associated with 1 in the original set.
Tuma new 1 is, this
New.
Right.
was
Is
passed
new.
out, and that's the PPA language. Tuma new 1 is the new
Yes.
PPA language. And then I did the Mille Lacs ban in all the vegetation and wildlife management plans, vague so that the staff can add it in there where they need to. And I adopted Sebin's forestry 1. And then the last one was your amendment to that special condition on wildlife, taking out the word that you wanted to take out, and I forgot it already.
Foraging.
Foraging, thank you.
Ms. Waller-Pitts, is that clear?
Thank you. Yes, that clarifies.
Any challenges with it or concerns?
No, Chair Stephen, thank you.
And Madam Chair, I praised you on the first question I had, should we ask about employment? I'm assuming that if this is built, you will have full-time employees tied to this facility?
Correct, in the order of 6 to 8 full-time employees housed locally within a certain mile radius of the facility.
And I'm assuming you had a conversation with our labor folks that they're here. I'll let them speak for themselves. So I want to make sure that they have the same idea that this is, by the way, this is an awesome site. I've been driving by it ever since a little kid. And so it really is the perfect location. It's not prime farmland. It's spent farmland. You have to find a substation to build it. That's a little extra work, but this is a great project. So I just want to make sure I had that out there. But to our labor friends, Madam Chair, I want to make sure they had a chance to give us their thoughts.
Oh, you haven't spoken yet on this project. My fault.
That was my fault, Madam
No,
Chair. We went down into the weeds so fast, literally into the
and
weeds.
I'm mixing up 2 dockets now. So it's nice to see you again, Mr. Franco and Mr. Kajewski. Please provide any remarks you would like.
First this time. Thank you, Chair Sieben and Commissioners. Good morning again. Lucas Franco on behalf of Leuna, Minnesota, and North Dakota. I can keep this very quick. Appreciate Pine Solar Power for their commitment to work with local labor and the engagement that we've had thus far. Once again, I think this is a really good model of engaging with local workforce development organizations such as ourselves to figure out how we maximize local socioeconomic benefits. Again, I just looked at the numbers for our membership alone, and we have within 50 miles, 1,370 members, and then 200 within 25 miles, so a large cluster of members in this area that are always eager for good energy work opportunities like this one. And in conclusion, we agree with staff recommendations and urge support for the site and route permits for this project. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak.
Mr. Kajewski.
Thank you once again, Richard Kajewski, the Director of Government Affairs for the North Central States Regional Council of Carpenters. I'm speaking on behalf of the Operating Engineers Local 49 as well today. I'll keep it brief as well. I mean, the 1,537 acres or so of land, the $507 million project is massive. I mean, it is a lot of work. We've had initial conversations, and we look forward to continuing to build a partnership with Pine Solar moving forward. And I would just say we've also read the ALJ's decision, and we agree that the Iron Pine Solar satisfied the applicable legal requirements, including environmental, technical, and community considerations, and request that the Commission grant the site permit, route permit for the projects. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Kirsch, really great job on the EA and your work in the docket. We appreciate it. Ms. Waller-Pitts, the same conversation I had earlier with the other applicant, any concern about, well, I'm sure there's concern about the changes that Congress is undertaking now related to the IRA, but anything about the construction timeline or associated concern with the federal government screwing up your project that you want to share with us? Hopefully not, but.
Thank you, Chair Sieben. The federal legislation is changing in real time, right? And so it's hard to make an assessment of what the impacts might be until that's finalized. But certainly the company has been tracking everything and is evaluating, will evaluate whatever comes out of that to try to keep the project moving forward.
And what is your expected construction start? Second quarter of 26, and do you have a GIA in place yet?
No GIA. That's been delayed a few times. Sorry, I'm trying to pull up my my notes one more time. That we're still awaiting the MISO DPP1 results, which is expected maybe in July, could be a little delayed, and then DTP2 later this year, such that construction would start right in Q2 of 2027.
Q2 of 27?
Yes, with a COD by the end of 2028.
So we're not, the commission is not holding up anything by granting the permit today though either, like you're waiting on MISO,
Correct.
Essentially.
Yes.
Yeah. Commissioner Sullivan.
Thank you. You don't have a PPA yet with the utility, correct?
Correct. We're waiting on the results from MISO's DPP1 results to give us a better picture of the cost upgrades to the system that might result from our interconnect and such. So we have a little bit more to go on that before we can start papering up. So we would start negotiating a PP1 upon those results and looking to finalize that after the DPP2 results come in.
I have to think about, I don't know how it all worked together, but whichever utility you work with to achieve the PPA, I hope they're listening, and I hope that they would seek ERA's determination, which is the expedited queue for MISO, which may or may not be approved in a couple weeks. So I would hope that that could be a part of the conversation. I don't know how the different definitive planning processes and whatnot work with, I don't know how all the puzzle pieces fit together, but holding up a project because of queue problems is especially important not to do right now, given that those credits are going to, and apparently the Senate just passed, the U.S. Senate just passed the Senate bill, so it's very likely that's going to happen. So I would hope that the ERA's framework could be used for some good. So I would encourage you to talk about that with whatever utility you find a PPA with.
Thank you.
Overall, it's a really good project though, and we appreciate all your work and efforts to move forward here. So on Commissioner Tuma's motion, any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion prevails. Thank you so much, everyone, and thank you, Commissioner Applegate and Mr. Lippert, for joining as well. We appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity to consult.
Appreciate it. Commissioners, do you need a little break, or then in 5 minutes, we'll take up our next item. The commission stands in recess. The commission will come back from its recess. Mr. Andriga, please introduce item number 3.
Certainly. Good afternoon, Chair Steven and Commissioners. Today's third agenda item is docket number E-015/S-25-138 in the matter of Minnesota Power's petition for approval of its capital structure and authorization to issue securities. The question before the Commission today is, should the Commission approve Minnesota Power's proposed 2025 capital structure and grant permission to issue securities? Staff and parties are available for questions. Thank you.
Great. Commissioner Sullivan, would you like to hear from the parties, or do you have questions?
I don't have any questions. I mean, I reviewed the record, I've reviewed the docket, and I'm comfortable. I appreciate the Department of Commerce's involvement in the record, and I'm ready to make a motion as soon as
I guess
folks
there
are
was
ready.
a bit of a discrepancy between H and I. So does the department, who's representing the department here?
Dr. Lieb.
Oh. Oh, wait, we were gonna just do, Mr. Adonisio, my apologies. Could you state your name for the record and let us know if you had any changes to the decision options, or otherwise, I assume with the date fixed in I, you're okay with I?
Madam Chair, Craig Adonisio for the Department of Commerce, and that's right, we're comfortable with I, or support I. It was just a mistake on my part.
Commissioner Hahn?
Thank you, Chair Steven. I have a question to company.
Ms. Katie, welcome. Please state your appearances.
Good morning, Chair Steven, Commissioners. Jennifer Katie on behalf of Minnesota Power, and I brought with me today Elite's Assistant Treasurer, Josh Tarrin.
Yes, I think decision option 1, B and D, you're asking 50% flexibility. And based on my conversation with the staff and the staff's research, other company does 10% band, and also you used to do 10% band. Are you planning to keep doing 15% post-acquisition? I don't know which direction we will go, but in case the acquisition is approved, are you still going in that direction?
Chair Steven, Commissioner Hom, thank you for the question. I think in the scenario where the acquisition was approved, we would need less flexibility, so I think a narrower band would be reasonable given the reliable access to equity that we would expect.
Okay, thank you. And then also item G, you are asking flexibility to offer preferred stock to the partners. Is it part of your acquisition condition, or is it just a separate way of you are trying to issue your equity?
Chair Steven, Commissioner Hom, thanks for the question. We viewed this as a way of navigating the interim period between the signing of the merger agreement and ultimately a commission decision and closing of the transaction. Given the year-plus process that this docket requires, this allowed us the flexibility to have source of financing other than just long-term debt during this interim period. Should the acquisition close, any preferred equity that we drew would be converted into common equity.
I mean, based on the record, you don't have any short-term debt. Why don't you use a short-term debt to mitigate this interim situation rather than issuing preferred stock to partners even before Commission consider that acquisition docket?
Yeah, I think, thanks for the question. We utilize our revolving line of credit. We asked for a variance, even though it's a multi-year facility, to treat that as short-term debt for the capital structure docket. So we use that in that manner.
However, we didn't want to be in a situation, given that our capital needs are so great over the next, over this year and into the future, we didn't want to be in a position where we become over leveraged and risk our credit rating.
So now I'll go the other direction. In case the acquisition is not approved by the commission, do you still plan to issue this preferred stock to the partners?
Right now, we project a need to draw on the preferred equity in the September or October timeframe. In the scenario where the acquisition was not approved or did not close, we would have the ability to redeem that preferred stock. First, any termination fee related to the transaction would be used to offset the preferred stock that was outstanding. Then we would look at any other financing that's available to us. I think our intent would be to replace it with the more common debt and equity that we've utilized in our capital structure, but we can't guarantee at some point in the future that the financing will be available and will be at a lower cost than this preferred. So we'd intend to take it out, but we can't guarantee that given the uncertainty of what might be available and what market conditions might be in the future.
Okay, so yeah, I was considering this option and whether I should put the condition that you can exercise this flexibility post-commission decision on the acquisition. Is it okay, or do you still need more flexibility to manage your investment? I understand you are facing huge investment, so yeah, I try to be flexible as much as I can, but I also need to protect ratepayers, so we need to know what is your best option here.
So in the event that the acquisition does close, we would no longer need the flexibility to issue this preferred. So it's really viewed as a bridge during this interim period that we would need it.
So that means you may need to issue this before September.
September or October right now is our best projection, given some of the uncertainty. Given the uncertainty over when ultimately a commission decision, as well as as we've talked about in the earlier dockets, uncertainty over policy in Washington and potentially need to move up capital expenditures and things like that. We think we do need the flexibility to be able to issue this before a decision is made.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Sullivan?
All right. Thank you, Chair Sieben. Thank you, Commissioner Hom. If there's any tweak or anything. Okay.
Just a real quick question. Mr. Anisio, I was looking at the decision options, and I know that your F, I think, was an attempt to do, and I'll go back to page 3 of the briefing papers, which would be the company's request, and they had a request under would be Roman 6 and Roman 7, and I note that Roman 6 did not appear, but my understanding, or at least our staff's belief, is that you were trying to combine 6 and 7 into F. Was that your intent, or are we needing something more there?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Tuma, that's correct.
Is that the company's understanding?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Tuma, yes.
That helps me out. I'm done asking questions.
Okay. So
no change to the decision options.
Okay. So with that, I would, my motion would be to move decision option 1, parts A through G, and then I. I think the department was comfortable with that. I will move decision option 2, 3, 4, and 5, and all parts A through E under 5.
Is there any discussion of the motion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion prevails. Thank you. The parties can come forward if they would like before we get to introductions. Ms. Ricker, good afternoon. Please introduce the docket.
Good afternoon, Chair Sieben and Commissioners. Item 5 is docket number E999M2599 in the matter of the 2025 Biennial Transmission Projects Report. There are 2 items associated with this docket. We're actually going to be swapping the order and hearing item 5B first. The issues before the Commission in 5B are: what methodology should the Commission direct affected transmission owners to use in calculating the payback period of grid enhancing technologies, or GETS, as directed by Minnesota Session Laws 2024, Chapter 127, Article 42, Section 52. What payback period value should the Commission set as the threshold at which a GETS project must be included in the implementation plan portion of a transmission owner's GETS report? Sorry, this is a mouthful. Should the Commission request or require transmission owners to evaluate the cost effectiveness or payback periods of GETS projects, addressing locations likely to experience high levels of congestion during the next 5 years under Clause 3, in addition to those with existing congestion under Clause 1? There have been 2 filings since briefing papers were posted, and there are copies of both at the side table, and I have a few additional with me if anyone needs. Commissioners should have them both. It's a letter from the department on June 27th, and Commissioner Ham's decision options filed yesterday. I have no further remarks, but I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ricker. We'll start with appearances, and if you could please introduce yourself and also tell us any exciting news you have.
I'm not sure about the exciting news, Commissioners, Chair Sieben and Commissioners. Gordon Peach with Great River Energy, representing the Minnesota transmission owners, and this will be my last meeting with the Commission.
That's what I was cueing you. Congratulations on your upcoming retirement, and thank you for all of your work you've done in front of the Commission over your career.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Christy Brisbane appearing on behalf of the Minnesota transmission owners, and I only have one job today, which is to add a little bit to what Mr. Peach said, and then I will turn over the substance to my colleague, Mr. Moeller. But as Gordy mentioned, this is his last appearance before the Commission. He has served in the utility industry for 40 years, and he has had the unique experience of both being on the transmission operators side and transmission planning. He's been part of most of the major collaboration on transmission planning that you have seen in this state and region, including being one of the visionaries behind the CapEx 2020 efforts, which then were sort of the underpinnings of MISO long-range planning. And important for today, he's also been a part of the Biennial Transmission Plan since its insemination in 2005. And really, without his leadership and technical expertise, we would not be where we are. So I asked Priti Patel to help me sum up Gordy's amazing career, and she said, yes, Gordy has worked for Great River Energy, but he has really worked for what is right for Minnesota. So on behalf of the Minnesota transmission owners and all of our members, we're just hoping that you will help us both thank Gordy for his leadership and his tremendous expertise, and then wishing him the very best in retirement.
David Moeller for the Minnesota transmission owners from Frederickson Byron, and I can't top what Chrissy just said, but I really thank Gordy for all his work he's been doing for the MTO and just for Minnesota over the years. Really appreciate that.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Jared Alhlina, Great River Energy, and also representing the Minnesota transmission owners on the GET study.
Sydney Lead with the Minnesota Department of Commerce.
Ari Zwick with the Minnesota Department of Commerce.
Adam Sokolsky with EDF Renewables, now called EDF Power Solutions, little name change.
And is anyone online that is hoping to be To the WAT Coalition, Ms. Selker, please introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Julia Selker, Executive Director of the WAT Coalition, the Trade Association for Grid Enhancing Technologies. Also, two of my members who are subject matter experts are on the line as well.
Did you want to introduce yourself, Mr. Cleaver? I assume that's you.
Sure. This Tom Cleaver, Vice President of Heimdall Power, which provides a dynamic line rating technology and has done projects in Minnesota. I'm located down in Houston.
And Mr. Ruiz?
Chair Steven, Pablo Ruiz, I'm CEO and CTO of NuGrid. NuGrid is a topology optimization software and services company. We are active in Minnesota and MISO at large, providing congestion monitoring and mitigation services. We're based out of the Boston area.
Thanks for being on. Commissioner Hom, did you want to begin with questions?
Thank you, Chair Steven. So I'll ask a company first, or MTO. There are several technologies listed in this discussion. Okay, I'll go straight. What can you do as a single company or as a Minnesota utilities, or what you cannot do without MISO's involvement in this? So can you separate these in two groups?
Chair Steven, Commissioners, I think when it comes to GETS technologies, I agree with you. There's several categories. I think when it comes to ambient adjusted ratings and dynamic line ratings, those are things that individual utilities can do on themselves to mitigate congestion as a whole. There's a technology called smart wires, which modifies the impedance of the line to force power to go on different parts of the system as a whole. That can be done as an individual utility, but I would argue that it becomes a regional issue when it comes to identifying where you shift the power to and how do you optimize the system as a whole. And talking to the vendor itself, I see some opportunities to leverage that in the state to take advantage of the North Dakota export interface, as well as the future 765 line and the ability to possibly load that up even further by modifying the underlying system impedances. When it comes to other technologies like associated with line technologies and that type of stuff, that's an individual utilities decision, but it comes at a significant cost and time frame to complete those types of things. And so when you think about congestion as a whole and the time frame that you need to accomplish it, I think the ambient adjusted ratings, dynamic line ratings are the optimal solutions to address it short term. The smart wire technologies is something that's sort of the midterm, and then the long term is sort of modifications to the existing wires. And I know another topic of my hand is modifying the grid as a whole, of taking facilities out of service. As an operator, I like to have everything in service. But recognize that there are times when taking certain lines out of service does improve the overall operation of the grid as a whole. But you need to keep in mind at the end of the day, reliability is still king, and making sure that the customers have the reliable power so needed for the next contingency is paramount in my world. So thank you.
Thank you. And then what coalition? Can you weigh in on this discussion? Which technology can be done by Minnesota utilities, and then which technology the strategy has to have a MISO part of this discussion?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Ham. I think all of these technologies can be evaluated and studied by the utilities, and that they can bring these solutions to MISO and look for a way to implement them. Certainly MISO to deploy or DLR in real time across the system, that will likely require some upgrades to the system, but to manage specific deployments, I think that they should be able to accommodate that in the near term. So I know I'm not directly answering your question, but I think that the projects need to come from the utilities, and that I believe MISO can unlock the value of these deployments both on a case-by-case basis and eventually through, process upgrades that would help them scale.
Thank you. And I don't know how familiar with the MISO tariff, but are you aware or can you agree that MISO is not the one who's setting the line rating, but transmission owner is the one setting the line rating?
That's certainly my understanding.
Okay. Under that circumstance, our utility can set their own line rating through the ambient or just line rating by season, and then also they can implement the dynamic line rating using some technology and supplement this information to MISO, and the MISO is required to take those numbers and use that number for their operation.
Yes, with FERC Order 881, that required all regional transmission operators and independent system operators to be able to accept dynamic line ratings. My understanding is that there's been delays to the implementation of that order, but that in the long run, MISO would be expected to be able to process DLR at scale from any transmission owner. I still think that, as you laid out, there's some incremental ways that MISO could update transmission ratings that do not require a sort of instantaneous transfer of real-time ratings. So seasonal ratings that are then updated based on operational needs is one way to manage that in the interim as processes are updated. I might ask Tom to weigh in if there's anything else on that answer.
Yes, the MISO, we're working with a number of different utilities within MISO, and you are correct that the ratings are provided by the utility, and MISO does have, even starting manually, can use and accept ratings in real time right now, whether temporarily adjusted ratings, emergency ratings, or ambient adjusted or dynamic line ratings. So these do have an immediate benefit and can be used and have been used already within MISO. And we've had examples of immediate impacts during high congestion periods over the last year within Minnesota.
Okay, thank you. And since you're on, so I'll ask you one more question. So your technology can be transported to different section of the line if Great River Energy wants to move that to different side of the transmission line, so it can mitigate certain congestion which occur in different section of their system.
That is correct. And to be clear, the overall ratings that are presented are the facility ratings. So, as in the case with Minnesota, the line itself or any one section of the line may be the limiting factor that will set the rating. And with dynamic line ratings, the idea is to get that section up, but we're always going to be presenting the maximum rating for that facility. So we do incorporate and consider the other limiting elements or other adjacent utilities, facilities, or the substations themselves. So overall, yes, for any particular line, our technology can be deployed or redeployed to provide additional ratings for that line to be able to give a proper facility rating for the overall circuit.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll ask the department. So you have heard the discussion so far, and I mean, we have another, I think, section of this one, 5A, but what is your plan to evaluate, given this circumstance, what is your plan to do your work on this grid enhancing technology requirement required by statute.
Dr. Lieb.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Ham, I'll start here at high level and then I'll let Ari answer if there's anything at a more detailed level that I should assess. I think the questions about what's in MISO and what's in PUC jurisdiction have been answered pretty well here. Overall, I think the department's way of thinking about both the grid enhancing technologies reporting that's new from the new legislation and also the existing biennial transmission reporting process is that regardless of who has jurisdiction over sort of the planning and the modeling of these investments, we want there to be good transparency when this gets to the commission on how these investments are being thought about and how they're affecting the utility's overall system, because we want to make sure that as we're planning the system in either a resource planning docket or a distribution system planning docket, that we are aware of what's happening in the bulk transmission system and how that's affecting both capacity and energy availability or restrictions. And so while a lot of this does happen at the MISO level, I think historically that's happened in a bit of a vacuum and hasn't been really brought into the PUC in a really streamlined and transparent way. So we want to try to think about these investments coming to the PUC, really understanding the trade-offs, the costs, the benefits of those investments so that when they're coming to the PUC for an IOU for cost recovery decisions, we've really fleshed out what the value of those resources is, and we can understand if we're making the right investment, the right level of investment, and also have, I think, better vision about how we're making the transmission investments in general, recognizing that those are going to be a large bulk of the investment we're going to need to make over the next 10 plus years. As far as detailed analysis, I think the department's really thinking about what in places where in nodes where we're seeing significant congestion, what's the best way to try to alleviate that? How much can we alleviate that? I think there's a lot of discussion about trying to be forward-looking here and trying to understand if we're continuing to build out resources in an area that has congestion, what's the impact of those resources and what's the value of those resources if they're going to experience congestion and there may not be good solutions to mitigate that. And I think overall what we really want to understand is there's a lot of investments that need to be made across the system: generation resources, transmission resources, distribution resources, including demand response and demand flexibility. And with those transmission and generation assets on the bulk system, where does GETS fit in there to really make sure that we're getting the most value for our money and really making sure that we're making good investment decisions? Because when this gets to a rate case, there's a lot of stuff to be looked at, and it's sometimes long after we've made the decision to make this resource investment. And we really want to make sure that we have good analysis and understand the system that we're building. Anything to add there, Ari?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hum, I would just add, and it's on the agenda already, but we are seeking professional services to actually analyze the projects that come in, and we have decision option 12, at least based on what I've seen so far in 24-316, the Nobles curtailment docket, that it might be underwhelming what we find, and that's why we're looking to expand the scope, at least if we don't have enough projects. That's the tiered level of how I plan to approach it.
Thank you. I think we can set aside that discussion for the second half of this discussion. So I'll go with EDF. So my question will be a little bit different to you. What is the current status of your Nobles County substation congestion curtailment issue? And can you give us a little bit of more update on that?
Sure, Commissioner Ham, members of the Commission, Adam Sokolsky with EDF Power Solutions. To date, and I didn't pull year-to-date numbers. I should have this morning had them sent over, but the general trend for our assets in the Nobles County substation area continues to be very bad. Curtailment numbers over 50% at Fenton, high curtailment at Stone Ray. We've not seen significant change. There have been some outages on and off. We continue to explore reconfiguration solutions, have not proposed, I don't believe, any in the last several months since I've been before you, and are looking at utilizing other forms of congestion relief beyond transmission improvements coming down the pike. So we're hopeful, but we've got county commissioners calling us all the time saying, why are the turbines stopped? Why are your payments so low on production tax? And it's continuing, really no change since 2024.
Okay, thank you. So you point out that item, that reconfiguration, because your effort and Commissioner Sullivan's effort and then Xcel Energy, MISO instituted system to properly evaluate in transparent manner whether it is doable or not on the MISO tariff, and it is functioning. I know that approval rate is very low, but at least that transparent process is implemented because of your effort, Commissioner Sullivan's effort, and Xcel Energy's effort to work together to try to mitigate your curtailment issue.
Yeah, I agree, and thank Commissioner Sullivan and the Commission for support on the reconfiguration process. We think there's probably improvements that could continue to be implemented there to ensure that we have better timelines, right? When there's a large outage that's going to start, a month away, we can get a reconfiguration option before MISO and the transmission owners fast enough, and maybe even have the transmission owners have a bit of responsibility to come up with potential or study potential reconfigurations when there is a known large outage going to happen, in particular on those lines that come out of the Nobles County substation and cause the FENOC constraint to bind. So, yeah, I think we can go to, reconfiguration 2.0 here in Minnesota and try to find even better ways to implement that. But those are very low-cost solutions that don't require a capital expenditure and can be implemented very quickly and then can be taken off very quickly as congestion and outages change. We know that we're going to have a very large scale of additional outages in southwestern Minnesota to accommodate the LRTP and MTEP plans. Large transmission coming. We know that those will require large, significant, long-duration outages. And so we should start planning today for those impacts tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. I don't know whether you watched the last week's commission proceeding, but I think Minnesota Commission already put Minnesota IOU on notice on that issue. I think we are asking significant information and their activity to mitigate overall congestion using all sorts of strategy, including GATS. So hopefully that has a clear signal to our utility. So I agree with you that we are expecting potentially huge congestion coming our way, and we need to deal with it. Okay, thank you. So now I'll ask MTO along this line of discussion, why, other than Xcel Energy, you guys are not proactively engaging in MISO process to promote reconfiguration?
I think we're very supportive of the MISO reconfiguration process. It takes time to run through the exercise, particularly the Nobles area. I can only speak on behalf of GRE. We have very limited assets in that particular area that do not contribute to the congestion necessarily, so it's very difficult. I think some of the issues, what I understand, it's more than just a thermal issue down in southwestern Minnesota. It's a dynamic stability issue, and those create different types of challenges associated with how do you maintain the system if there's a fault on the system that causes an aberration that begins to trip other units offline and that type of stuff. But when it comes to reconfiguration, I think the Minnesota utilities are very supportive of that if it makes logical sense. We work through the MISO process where an entity contacts MISO and makes a recommendation as to what kind of reconfiguration they're contemplating. MISO then works with the local utility to ensure that they didn't miss anything because they focus on the bulk electric system, the system they operate. But there are significant underlying systems that we need to be aware of. A lot of the 69 kV is looped, it's not radial, and so you need to understand what the implications of that might be on the underlying system that MISO doesn't necessarily model all the time.
Okay, and then I think along this line of discussion, Xcel Energy commit to add additional transformer at the Noble substation to relieve that choking point at the Noble substation.
That's correct. And I'm not sure what the status of that is at this point, but I know purchasing transformers this time has got significant lead times, and so I'm not sure where they are in that process as a whole.
Yeah, hopefully that shows up in the November 1st filing to make sure that we have a full information about what's going on in that area.
Yeah, that's what we intend to do.
Okay, so I have one more question, but if other commissioner has. Okay. Then I'll go with this next line of question. The historical congestion versus future congestion. I think that was discussed in the comments, and I think that is required to do certain study. But to do future congestion, you have to identify congestion. But typically, what is your contingency you are considering when you are predicting congestion?
Sure. Chair Sieben, Commissioner Ham. Yeah, as far as future congestion, we do have models, and typically we take off-the-shelf MISO models. We take the nearest term, which is like a 5-year out model, and then we have to back it up with generation, retirement assumptions, and a number of other things. And so in ProMod itself, it does consider N-1. That said, we know that in the operational world that there are tens of outages that happen across the system. Some of the things we also consider is which outages have been put into CRO, the kind of the control room operating window. The transmission owners are required to submit outages if they want to take outages, and these are the planned ones. And so as we move forward and we look at the future modeling and the future congestion, it tries to take into consideration those that have been put forward. That said, we are making assumptions based upon historical weather patterns that are then modeled in ProMod, and that's done by Hitachi when they develop the ProMod software. And that said, as far as like the weather, the temperature, the load profiles, the load use across the system, the patterns, the generation patterns, the market prices, it tries to take that into consideration. One of the things it doesn't model are forced or unplanned outages that may occur on the generation or the transmission system. So that said, we do N-1, that's inherent in the software, and if it's depending on the type of analysis, we do look at what has been submitted into the CRO system.
Okay, so there is a long-term transmission planning, such as a market efficiency project or LRTP, long-range transmission planning project, versus I don't know whether you're familiar with the MISO's targeted market efficiency project to address certain very short-term congestion. Or can you help so people can understand why sometimes you have to look at the historical congestion versus a future congestion?
Yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner. And so looking at historical congestion, there's a certain unique generation and load pattern and weather pattern and usage that occurs across the system depending on what's available, what's in service, what's out of service. And so we have gone back, I can just speak for Great River Energy, to try to replicate historical weather fronts that have come through, just to understand what happened and to do some forensics on it. And it's very, very difficult to try to replicate what happened. And so there are times where we know what the LMPs were in different areas, and we've gone back and tried to develop models to show that. And sometimes we are just not even close. And it's just, there are some outages that are recorded in MISO as they occurred. Some aren't, and we don't always know what generation is available. And so when you try to take historical congestion and you try to look even forward into the near term and try to determine, is that congestion going to occur? There is really a big mismatch between what actually happened and the assumptions moving forward. And the assumptions, especially as line outages and major generation plants, it's so sensitive to what the condition and what the topology of the system is that the changes can be, can exaggerate or understate the amount of congestion that was seen in the historic.
Okay, thank you. In that case, system optimization, topology optimization, in theory, can be very helpful to mitigate this unexpected congestion, right?
Yeah, Chair Sieben, Commissioner Helm, that is true that you can mitigate certain types of congestion. That's looking at the economics of the system can be mitigated by altering the topology, the configuration of the grid.
So in that case, you cannot do that alone without MISO's intervention in that topology optimization for the whole system energy dispatch.
Right, as was described by Gordon Peach, that yes, this is a MISO. They're the ones that dictate the configuration of the system and the operation of the system. So it goes through the MISO processes.
Okay, so probably everybody knows that who has a functional control over your transmission line. Minnesota transmission owner who participates in MISO is individual utility or MISO who has a functional control over?
MISO has the functional control.
Okay, thank you. So I'll ask a department along the line. I think last week I made some decision option in addition to existing one. One part of that is talking about financial transmission rights and auction revenue rights. I don't know how much you are familiar with that terminology and concept. When you are mitigating congestion, not about physical congestion, but financial impact to the ratepayers, there is a way to mitigate through the financial instrument. Are you aware of that?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, we are aware of the mechanism. I'm not really tied into the details. You'd probably need Nancy Campbell for that.
So in that case, to mitigate the congestion, not physical, but the financial impact to the ratepayers, you may not need any of GATS if you have a good financial hedging.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, that's correct. I think there's both physical things that could be done and financial instruments, as you're pointing out. I think those are the types of things we would study if we were doing a congestion study, either under this GETS docket or probably more appropriately in the biennial transmission reporting, where we're looking at concerns around congestion and planning for that.
Okay, so financial transmission right, auction revenue rights takes a long process to understand what it is and then to understand how company is doing this strategy to implement this financial instrument. You may need a lot of knowledge built up over the time. Do you think the department has any long-term understanding of not the concept itself, how company was doing it?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, I don't think at this time we do have that knowledge. I think that's something we would need to work on iteratively to be effective in that discussion. And it is something that we discussed with the finance team last week about how to make sure that we're building out that expertise and how we want to move forward as this becomes a more significant issue on the system, that we're able to participate there more effectively.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll go to the Mr. Skolsky. I agree with you that we are expecting a lot of potential congestion and outage condition due to the construction. That is a good thing, but until we get the good thing, we may have a significant challenge to mitigate this. So recently, the MISO was discussing at the MISO forum about sequencing construction and sequencing certain outages to make sure that during this heavy construction time frame to optimize construction and outage situation. Since I haven't participated in the meeting, so I don't know whether you have any knowledge about what's going on with it, and then what is your opinion about that approach as a $0 cost approach we need to take first, because that can help everybody without costing any money.
I'm not involved in those meetings. I think there's others in my company who are, and would not want to speak on their behalf on that. I have not been in them. I think big picture, when we think about what we face, we know that we have LRTP and MTEP lines coming, and it makes a ton of sense to optimize that outage approach and the construction approach such that we're minimizing either potential congestion or potential reliability problems as a result of all of these outages. We do have a good, we've got a time frame here we can plan, and that planning should be happening both at MISO and the transmission owner level. Clearly, minimizing congestion costs for the ratepayers is an important aspect, and we should be doing it straight away with planning for major facilities. We at EDF are not naive. We know there's going to be some additional outages and congestion and some operating restrictions due to the build out of new transmission facilities, and we just hope that doesn't impact the Nobles County area disproportionately versus other parts of the system.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll ask a company opinion on that portion. I think MISO was discussing about this sequencing. What was the level of Minnesota utility participating in this proceeding, and what was your opinion, and what's going on at the MISO at that level?
Yeah, Chair Sieben and Commissioner Ham. So the utilities, to the best of their abilities, provided outage data for the Tranche 1 facility construction. And so those were provided to MISO, you know, and so one of the conclusions that has been indicated here is that definitely doing coordinated outages has a positive impact on the economics of the grid. And so the takeaway is that certainly the transmission owners of the constructing utilities should work with MISO to do that coordination. You know, that said, when you're looking at almost 5 years into the future, you know, plans change. It could, you know, the equipment deliveries change just given the supply chain. But the takeaway is that good coordination is imperative, and it should continue as we move into Tranche 1 construction.
Okay, thank you. And then one more. So is there any update on Grid North Partners 19 project? I understand you are done with it. Is there any additional, there's a team building of the transmission line that will relieve some of the congestion we are expecting for Minnesota, which will be which will show up in the November 1 filing, or can you give us some preview of it?
Yeah, Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, could you restate the question?
So Grid North Partners had a 19 project which was implemented because Minnesota utility had a concern with the congestion, and you guys tried to relieve the congestion with 19 project. Is there a version 2 or a sequel to it, and can we have some preview if you are planning to file that in the November 1st filing?
Right. So Grid North Partners itself is not conducting an independent study, but they are undertaking the Minnesota Grid Enhancing Technology Study that's required by the legislation, and that will be in the November 1st biennial plan filing.
So that'll be your main focus rather than doing like a Grid North Partners 19 project. Now you are focusing on this grid enhancing technology.
Right, and they are quite similar And so we don't have a parallel effort going on. That said, we've been working on this for almost 8 months now and have had well in excess of 10 meetings to talk about these projects.
So in that case, do you have a model to share with the department if department wants to analyze that one? Is there any legal constraint that you can share that to department or department's consultant?
Yeah, Chair Sieben, Commissioner Ham. So we understand that we can provide the assumptions, and we are not able to provide the actual models to somebody that does not have like a ProMod licensing. That said, we can provide all of the assumptions, the inputs as possible.
If department acquire ProMod program, do you have any other legal restriction, for example, non-disclosure agreement for the out-of-state utilities data in that model?
Yeah, outside of anything that would violate CEII, if somebody else has, another entity has the licensing, we are able to provide that. For example, MISO has a ProMod license, Great River Energy does, and other utilities, and we get our models from MISO. We're able to do that because we also have the ProMod licensing.
So other non-Minnesota utilities not going to claim that you are violating their non-disclosure agreement with the MISO by providing that data?
Yeah, it would depend upon the licensing, and we would, if we had any questions or any gray areas, we would certainly contact Hitachi and make sure that we're in compliance with our licensing agreement.
So you only talk about power flow study. How the ProMod? How about the power flow study model?
So with the effort that is going on right now, there is not accompanying power flow analysis. That said, as we move forward, in certain cases, we will provide the analysis just to make sure that we don't have cascading or violations that go beyond that.
Well, I mean, if department wants to develop the alternatives, they have to have that no harm or the stability or reliability study. Then to do that, they need this power flow study model.
Yeah, that is true too. To perform a comprehensive alternative analysis, you would have to have the identical models and the software and the process that we undertook.
Okay, thank you. You are going to make some comment before?
He said it all.
Okay, thank you. So I think my question is done, and then I can discuss my decision option unless other commissioner has other. Yep. So I'll ask MTO first. Have you seen my decision, list of my decision option? Do you have any concern with any of those items?
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Hom. I think I think we're generally supportive of the revised decision alternatives as you put them forward, including the additional language. I think the question, as you were talking about FTRs and ARRs earlier, like how that would work in practice is maybe a question, and maybe it's our job to figure that out. But given that the revenues are allocated to market participants and not to transmission owners under the MISO process, it might, how to match those two together may be a challenge or something we'd have to figure out how to do in practice. But I don't know if you have advice or counsel on that. And then I guess the other one, as far as decision alternative 20, which is about providing the models in a transparent way. As Mr. Lena said, there's licensing requirements, there's other things, and we also have to comply with the Minnesota Data Practices Act and CEII and those type of things. So we don't think that decision is necessary. Not necessarily an objection, but probably decision alternative 20 would not be necessary. But we're good with your new decision alternative 21 as well.
Okay, thank you. So for the clarification for that section, talking about FTR, ARR, the reason I put both is if you own ARR, you have an option to convert that to FTR while you get the revenue. So what I was trying to show is either you take the revenue, then net that revenue out, or if you convert that to FTR, then you can net your FTL revenue. So you can have a one-to-one match right there. I'm not asking you to find third-party FDR revenue because it's not your money, not the ratepayers' money. I'm only trying to net ratepayers' revenue out of this computation. So what is the actual incremental benefit of doing this? So I hope that helps to understand intent of my option here.
I think that does help, and I think we can take that back and kind of work with, because there's different parts of the utilities that do FTR and ARR revenues on the transmission marketing side versus those that are on the planning side. And just have to make sure we match that up and then kind of work with those entities.
Thank you. And then once again, yeah, I think any party who wants to have your model, they have to abide with the federal law and any other requirement. That's why I was asking you that what they have to anticipate to get the model to do their work. So hopefully whoever is trying to do understand the requirements. Okay, and what's coalition?
On the same topic, Commissioner Ham.
So what is your opinion on my list of decision option e-filed yesterday?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Ham and Chair Steven. I think I was just looking at them this morning, so I believe the changes generally are improvements to the recommendations. I think these are good additions to the point that you've already made on the ARR FTR revenue. It is very complicated, but what we've understood from the WAC Coalition perspective is that generally reducing congestion reduces cost. Congestion is a transparent measurement of the need for more transmission capacity. The benefit to consumers may not be exactly dollar for dollar the congestion cost, but addressing the congestion should lower rates generally, and that auction revenue rights are not always perfectly distributed to match the congestion that comes, because it is very hard to predict. But one way to address this, I believe, is to make changes on a timeline that at least allows the FTR market to understand what's coming. And so as long as it's not a huge shift, unexpected shift, that the market should be able to respond to changes from GETS. But as you said, very, very complicated, but generally no other concerns about these changes.
Okay, thank you. And then I'll ask the departments.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Ham, we appreciate you putting the motion together. I think we're generally in agreement. The only things we'd like you to consider are on 5 for the payback period of 1 to 5 years, less than or equal to 5 years. I think the department still prefers either the life of the asset or until the congestion is relieved, whichever is shorter. I think the concern is that the 5 years might limit more capital intensive projects that have really significant long-term benefits. And giving a longer runway on these things might result in more robust, larger capital investments like transformer upgrades and things like that, as opposed to just limiting us to the cheaper suite of options like dynamic line rating investments.
Thank you for that concern. Yeah, I was giving a lot of thought on that part, but Great River Energy is already doing dynamic line rating. Xcel Energy is doing pilot, and they committed to implement that as soon as possible after their pilot is done. So given that Minnesota Power is the only IOU, I think we need to consider their rate impact to the ratepayers. Do you, even given that, do you still have a concern that this 5-year, I took it from the Watt Coalition proposal. It's not my proposal. I was trying to incorporate their number 6 into it because I want to make sure that it is upfront. It's a numbering issue. Yesterday I had a long discussion with my staff which number should go first. But to do that, I just merged those together.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, I'm glad to see utilities doing work, particularly in DLR. That's not my concern. The concern is more just on the larger transmission system impacts. And again, the only information I have to work on is the information that was filed that we refiled in the instant docket. But if there, and I guess if there aren't a sufficient amount of projects that we're looking for, I mean, we had a goal of 10. And if there aren't, then we do want to expand the scope. And that's the whole motivation behind us trying to have a more flexible look at things, is just to, again, like have a more holistic perspective. And that's how we're viewing it. If you go with your decision option, I think it will be more likely just DLR projects, and at least that's how I'm thinking about it. And if that's acceptable, that's fine. Or maybe some power flow controllers. I wasn't clear if that has to go through MISO or not. In either case, we'd still like to see studies. But just so you have that awareness, like it's fine if you want to keep the 5 years.
Thank you. Under this option, they have to do study on everything. And then also I think at least 3 IOU on the notice last week, and then I put the long list of the conditions for them to report next year. So I think it's not just single isolated issue I'm doing on parallel. So under this 5 year, this is just a matter of picking certain project which can be feasible and beneficial to ratepayers. And the reason I was initially thinking 3 years, and then now I agree with the 5 years, is because I'm netting ARR and FTL revenue out of it. So I think it's not, let's see how it comes out. But I think if we have a comprehensive study, I think we can do better next year. I think this is the first year. Hopefully, if we see more information in November 1, I think hopefully we can do better.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, I think we have an understanding, and I think we have a shared goal here. So I think being iterative on this is acceptable to the department. I think the only other thing we would invite some discussion on in the motion is the inclusion of 15. This was the department's attempt to thread the needle on the fact that we are dealing with just a straight payback period, not a cost-benefit analysis, but this is intended to provide information into the docket that would allow us to maybe think about this in a cost-benefit analysis type of way, even if that's not how we're going to make decisions on this docket, and really require the utility to do the analysis to look at the avoided costs, including rate of return, not just the capital investment, and some of the other system impacts. And even if that wasn't necessarily used in this docket to approve or deny specific GETS investments, I think having that information as we're thinking about planning the system, and also maybe when we get to a rate case, if we're looking at a specific grid enhancing technology investment, we have a full fleshed out understanding of the costs and benefits to ratepayers. So I think this is a good opportunity to get that information. Even if we're not going to be doing a full cost benefit analysis, this might still be the right place to report on that.
Yeah, I agree that cost benefit analysis is the right thing to do if we have all good information there. I think we are discussing this a lot in the MISO proceeding when we are talking about postage stamp versus a targeted cost allocation. It's about the precision versus accuracy. I think you can get a lot of good number, precise number. However, it may not be accurate number to report, given that a lot of uncertainty in predicting congestion and replicating past congestion using the model. That's why I think a payback, I think some of these participants in this proceeding is a part of the legislative process. That's why I think that was a part of that legislation. I understand why it ended up with that rather than BC ratio, but we discussed this a lot in there. And then one particular issue I have a concern with is a benefit of dynamic line rating with reliability and resilience. I think dynamic line rating, monitoring the system in real time, not only gives a better line rating, so that means sometimes your line rating will be below what you are expecting from static ambient adjusted line rating because it can really incorporate the situation. So economically, yes, it will be negative. However, it can give you better reliability. And then also, if you can detect line outage using this equipment, that can give us a resilience value to it. How can you quantify those resilience and reliability value? And if you don't quantify it, we can really underestimate value of this technology.
Dr. Lee.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, I think we're in agreement that the information, even if it's more of a quantitative narrative, is still worthwhile having here, though. I understand there's going to be enormous uncertainty in quantifying benefits like the ones you're describing, but I think if we don't ask the utilities to either attempt to quantify that or provide a narrative discussion about how those benefits are happening, some of these investments, when we get to rate recovery in a rate case, might be, if that's the first time we're thinking about it, might be a heavier lift to really think about. And I think that's why the department feels like this docket is the place for us to at least at minimum have a narrative discussion about the harder to quantify benefits of these investments.
Yeah, but what technology can they implement in this case? To me, as I think department rightly pointed out, under this circumstance, dynamic line rating probably the only one in the short run we can do it. That's why, based on what I understand from the GRE's discussion on the Himdall technology, the cost wasn't that big, and the return was very short. That's why I do not have much concern with trying to get the right formula at this point. I think gathering this information and trying to see what is the best path we can do following years, I think to me that's more important than trying to precisely narrow down things, even though that precise number may not be accurate number. So that's why we have to be very careful trying to be too precise.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, I think we understand that. I think we have a shared vision, and we're going to iterate here. And we would like to see larger capital investments beyond just DLR come through this docket, but it might take some time for us to really robustly do that.
Okay. Thank you. And then I'll ask EDF.
Commissioner Hom, Chair Stephen, I want to make sure I'm answering the correct question. You were asking about our position on the Commissioner Hom published decision options that were released yesterday, right?
Yes.
Yeah, we're in support of those.
Okay, thank you. And I hope you are part of the whole process because your company was a huge part of this discussion in the beginning of reconfiguration and any other issues.
We will stay engaged.
Okay, thank you. I'm good to move my motion if there's no other question.
Other discussion? Commissioner Hom?
So I'll move the option that pre-filed yesterday.
All of it?
Yes.
Even, I thought you were going to take out 20. Or no, you still
Nope.
think we should have it?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. On Commissioner Hom's motion, is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the motion prevails. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll now have Mr. Eknes introduce the other part of this docket. I'm stealing yours. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Agnes. Good afternoon. It feels like evening. Please introduce this item.
All right. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, Commissioners. This item is also docket 25-99 involving Minnesota transmission owners and the Department of Commerce. It's in the matter of the 2025 Biennial Transmission Projects Report and the subset of GETs that will be filed. The issue for the Commission is should the Commission approve the Department's request for additional funding. And staff has nothing to add beyond that, but is available for questions.
Commissioner Hom.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Sieben. So my question hopefully is simple because we already discussed the scope. So why can't you just use Minnesota Statute 216B.62 subdivision 3B or A that you have a $1 million funding to do this kind of work?
Dr. Lieb.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, are you referring to the $1 million assessment for reliability? Currently, that funding is used to support the Office of Energy Reliability and Security, and there are staff funded under that money.
Okay, I reviewed the statute and then your budget proposal in 2023 that is allowing 3 FTE and then other project. And then I don't know whether you backfilled the position that Mr. Wackler vacated. And then second, that was a double in 2023. It was originally $500,000. Now it became $1 million. Do you think you need more money? Are you using all those money, or is it because of compartmental issue that different group has their money so you cannot access to their money?
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, that pot of funding traditionally is separate from anything that's going through the commission. I think we're more comfortable doing the money through the assessment as we've proposed rather than taking it out of that pot of money. Just historically, that pot of money hasn't touched issues that are coming through the commission. And I think there's some organizational concerns around using it in that way. I'm not opposed to the idea, but I'd have to take it back and probably have some internal discussion with our budget team.
Yeah, based on what I read the statute, I'm not a lawyer, disclaimer, but you can use it for the state dockets.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, I'm also not a lawyer, and I also, as a non-lawyer, I completely agree with your also non-lawyer assessment, which is why I'm not debating whether or not that money could be used for this. I do think it's a bit of a wash, though, because that money's assessed back to the utilities, and the pot of funding we're asking for is also assessed back to the utilities. So if we're not spending the full $1 million in that funding pot, then we're not assessing the full $1 million. And if we are asking for the money for the consultant through this avenue, then it should be a wash. It would.
Okay, so here is another non-lawyer advice to you. Knowing that history of that fund used to be $1 million that got cut in half, and that got strong sunset provision because department was not using it for the reason that's stated in the statute. I think using that money for the function the statute is asking you to do it will protect that funding in the long run. And I really appreciate department participation in the RTO world using that funding. But in that vein, I strongly urge you to use that money first if you can access to it under your internal accounting process, because that way you can protect that funding in the long run.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, I understand and I appreciate the feedback. If the commission strongly prefers that we use that funding, I can check in with my budget team and confirm that we have enough to cover this RFP for that out of that pot. But from my perspective, it would be preferable if you could approve the funding through the mechanism that we've asked it for. And I don't think there's any impact to ratepayers, regardless of which funding pot we're taking the money from. As I've discussed, it should be a wash.
Okay, thank you. And is there any second opinion?
So if I'm tracking here, Dr. Lieb, what you're suggesting is that the authority you already have for the $1 million, you may be able to, that may not be fully utilized, and you may be able to use that assessment for the consultant that you wanted here. But you're saying if that's not the case, then you still want the commission to grant authority to give you the additional ability to assess for the hiring of the consultant?
Chair Sieben, I think that would be our preference. I can check with my budget team, confirm whether there is some carryover in that fund and whether or not that money is not already earmarked for something else.
The question I had for staff around your proposal was not around this, but was more about whether there's any sort of cap on the assessment that you're requesting, either a time reporting period or a dollar amount. I don't think there is, but what are your thoughts on like the approximate amount of dollars that you're asking to be assessed? You know, or do you know what the RFP dollar amount will be approximately?
Chair Sieben, the team's currently putting together the scope of work. I think if you wanted us to, in the next 2 weeks, we could put a filing in, or whatever the right procedural thing would be, to let you all know we could give you the full scope of work and the estimated budget.
I mean, I just think that would be helpful to know, but I don't know if we need, how procedurally we would do that. I don't, if it's 200,000 or 800,000, for example, that's a big difference. But I don't know what you were thinking, Commissioner Ham, here.
Yeah, if other commissioners okay, I think originally it was department asked this to be a consent agenda. I put it in this full agenda so all 5 commissioners can discuss. Now we had this discussion, we can use a consent agenda path so they don't have a additional delay with this new information. We can just table this, or we can close this one and then they ask them to file another request.
Yeah, I think the concern is not that we don't want you to do the work or hire the consultant to help you assess. The concern is that those costs go back to ratepayers, whether they're assessed through the existing $1 million or that you're already assessing, or if you're asking for additional money for the consultant. So we trust you that you'll do it in a way as tight as possible to minimize cost to ratepayers. And I would support that then if you file the information and then it can go on the consent agenda and proceed. That I'm comfortable with that, if others are. Is that what you were thinking, Commissioner Ham?
So I can deny this one without prejudice so they can refile it with more detail.
With the understanding that then it will go on the consent agenda, and don't ask for $20 million on the consent agenda, and it should be good. Mr. Moeller?
If I may, Chair Sieben, just weigh in just briefly, and we're generally supportive of technical assistance as additive to the process, and we understand that. And the department talked about this with us as part of Commissioner Ham's consultation motion from the last hearing. I guess what we would maybe narrow the scope of the technical assistance to the GETS part of it, just because that's the new legislation, that's kind of the new part of this biennial transmission plan. And then also, if there's some type of soft cap that the commission would have, subject to what the RFP is, but just that if it goes over that, that they have to come back to the commission for additional process, or at least additional approval on that.
I thought it was the request was only for the GETS portion.
I think it was open-ended. It was our interpretation, so we're hoping it could be narrowed, but be up.
Dr. Lieb, did I not read the petition closely enough? I thought it was just for GETS.
Chair Sieben,
Technical assistance.
I apologize if it was not clearly written. It is not intended to just be for GETS. It's intended to be for GETS, transmission modeling, congestion modeling.
That's why I mentioned power flow study, because their intent is a full evaluation of biennial transmission. I'm fine if they are willing and can do, but given the time schedule, because November 1st filing, and we have to make a decision by June 1st, I don't know whether you can pull that, because that's why this year you just focus on GETS. And then if you want to engage in this, rather than doing in this docket, go to the MISO meeting, participating in the MISO SPM, PSC, PAC, all those meetings, you can make a huge difference right there. I think doing after the facts, after they go through this MISO process, it'll be very difficult for you to challenge it. And then also it'll be a waste of time for many people because we have to rehash the same thing. We spend so much time on that in that process.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, I think we recognize the process is going to be iterative, and we're not going to eat the entire apple this first time. We're going to probably take a small bite. But I think that giving us some broader scope to pick out some of the larger investments and do analysis on those beyond GETS is going to allow us internally to build expertise around those things, which will also allow us to engage more effectively in the MISO and OMS discussions, and to start slowly bringing more transparency into this space around those investments. And I also think on the the congestion piece, there's going to be solutions beyond just GETS that we want to look at to deal with those congestion issues. And having a consultant who's going to support us in thinking about those is going to be better. I think if you're concerned about the cost of doing this amount of modeling, we could, again, once we put a scope together, put out a rough idea of what we think we want to spend. And I think we'd be happy to take even a soft or a hard cap on that, so that we obviously are not going to be able to boil the ocean and model every single project that's in these reports. But I think we certainly want to go beyond just looking at GETS. And I think that that's important. Regardless of whether or not we're going to be able to actually change anything, I think really understanding the assumptions that were made by the utilities in the power flow modeling and the ProMod modeling, and allowing us to have better transparency and discussion about that in this space is going to be really important as we continue to build out the energy system and as we approve cost recovery for these investments.
I don't disagree, but my concern is duplicating the process, because that is heavily discussed and countered in the MISO process. Now you are trying to second guess some of those large projects. After the facts, it went through a lot of process to evaluate it. Being said, yes, I think we cannot prohibit you to challenge this project in the certificate of need and any other proceeding. So I'm happy to see that department is trying to engage in this process. But I was suggesting you that what is the right way to do it, more efficient way to do it, not wasting ratepayers' money, is the MISO process. You engage in that process, you can save time and money and more effective.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, we hear that, but if this is all done in MISO and that's the end of it, then we're not really sure what the value of doing this in the biennial transmission reporting at all at the PUC is. I think ideally, yes, the department would have engaged earlier in the MISO process, and maybe we would have come and asked for consulting services or spent out of our own pots of money for consulting services at that point. But that we're too late in the process there. So now it's going to come to the commission. And I think, again, regardless of whether or not we're going to be able to change anything, having better insight and discussion for some degree for the sake of discussion, to educate us all as we're thinking about this, to think about the investments, to think about how we might want to order the utilities to do them differently next time, or information we might want them to look at next time, I think is still valuable, and it will set us up in the future to show up better and more effectively in the MISO space.
Yeah, I had a long discussion with Mr. Agnes, whether we need this docket. But this docket is very important for the Minnesota because not every project goes through the MISO process and heavily vetted at the MISO project. The reason I brought that up is you said big project. Big project is considered in the big frame of MISO-wide planning. That is different from the local project, small project. We don't get heavy vetting process at the MISO. We need to vet it in this docket. So to do that, I think if your scope is trying to vet the large project like LRTP project, MISO is a better place to do it. But if you want to do the small project, 69 kV, load interconnection project, they never talk about heavily in the MISO, but suddenly show up and they ask for it, yes, you can contribute to that discussion by doing separate analysis. But my suggestion was if you want to challenge a large project, MISO-wide project, it's better if you do it at the MISO.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Hom, I think that's really helpful input, and we had not decided yet how we were going to pick and choose which projects we wanted to look at. So I think that is a criteria that we could use, is maybe we want to look at the smaller ones or those that have maybe more community impact if there's something particular we want to look at there. I think that's all something we can try to incorporate into a scope of work. Regardless, I think we need the ability to do something beyond GETS. And I think the last thing I'll add on that is one way you could help us speed this up is to require the utilities to give us their pro form and their energy power flow modeling assumptions and inputs when they file the reports, rather than us having to ask for them through an IR.
My suggestion is you work with the utility 1 year ahead rather than waiting for they file it. Because based on the schedule I saw from 2023, Commission issue completeness review deadline November 21, initial comment January 15th, and reply comment March 15th. You don't have a time to do all those analysis if you start to engage in November 1st. My suggestion is after docket is closed in June 1st, you start to work with the utility and input right there. I think otherwise you cannot do this even if you have a consultant.
Commissioner Sullivan.
I'm just trying to kind of, Commissioner Hom, when I hear Dr. Lieb in the department, it feels to me that I'm understanding both positions here, but the department, if the department is able to analyze and study up to the part of the bulk transmission system that MISO studies, that's what I think would be a value in this exercise. You agree with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's why I had a long discussion with Mr. Agnes, and then we agreed that we need this docket because this is the place to evaluate those projects.
And Dr. Lieb, I mean that you're agreeing to that as well, right? It's just this would not be coming in and studying the 345s and the 270s and the 765s that MISO is planning and modeling. That's not what you would be seeking.
Chair Sieben, Commissioner Sullivan, I think based on this discussion, we would focus on the smaller stuff. And I think we're generally in agreement. The larger stuff has been studied very
It's basically
detailed.
like the way that, I might not be using the term exactly, but basically the underbuild for the mass highway system of the transmission system. You're looking.
That's correct. We want to look at the residential streets.
Got it.
Although I think that's where the distribution system is.
So I don't know, does the decision option, it doesn't do that right now, does it?
No, but I think Dr. Lieb has a better understanding now of what we're willing to approve on the consent agenda. I think not only like this discussion is helpful, but for me too, I don't think this is the right avenue to fund ongoing staff work at the department. I think it's a consultant for a designated period of time, and then likely will be an opportunity for the department to then make the case again of why that study was valuable and the consultant's work was informative and helped us make better decisions, and there would be a subsequent request for additional services. So hopefully that's kind of what you were thinking too, is it's not an ongoing forever scope of work.
That's correct. I think, one, we don't want to have a permanent FTE to do this work because it's a biennial report. And then I think also the licensing for the modeling software is not something we want to maintain.
Great. Okay. Commissioner Hahn, do you have a motion?
So with that understanding, I
Just so you or
move the
actually,
motion to deny the petition without prejudice. So department,
just lay it over, and I don't think we need a motion really. Yeah, we'll just lay the item over, and
then understanding we will follow up with the consent.
yes. And thank you everyone for your good work, and and that's all we have for our agenda meeting today. So the commission meeting is adjourned. Have a good afternoon, everyone.